right, everyone. Welcome back to the second episode of our Lord of the Rings special. Hopefully, one of many. And I'm once again welcome. I once again welcome the Modern Monarchist onto the show. Modern Monarchist, welcome back.
Hello, welcome all, one and all. Thanks for having me back, guys. Happy to be here.
All right, very good to have you here. So, I mean, not really. I don't think that we want to recap. Well, we'll do maybe a very quick story recap to see where we're at to kind of position ourselves. So, we've started with a long-expected party. So that was when Bilbo's and Frodo's birthday was being celebrated, and Gandalf came over, and he found in Bilbo's possession, or he knew that it was in Bilbo's possession, but that kind of topic of the ring that Bilbo's had since his adventures, it kind of popped back up. And now that Bilbo's left, and left on a to go on a journey to the elves, he's left everything, including his possessions in the Shire, Bag End, and the ring, to Frodo. And after much deliberation and study, years of study actually, Gandalf came to the conclusion that it is the One Ring to rule them all, and he came back and instilled upon Frodo a quest. And that quest is to, well, ultimately it is to destroy, probably, the ring. But for now, it is a quest to just take it to Rivendell. And then the council is going to happen there to decide the ultimate fate of the ring and how we're all going to deal with it. And Frodo, tagged along by a couple of his close friends, Sam, Merry and Pippin, also hobbits, they have been traveling through dangerous forests, encountering, by this point, very strange creatures, elves, Tom Bombadil, very strange creatures you'd know if you've listened to our last stream, but also if you've, of course, read the books. And we are at the point where they ultimately escaped. They escaped the forest, and they said their final goodbyes to Tom Bombadil, and now they are on their way to Bree. They're on the way to the Inn of the Prancing Pony, and this is where we've stopped. We've stopped with Chapter 9, The Sign of the Prancing Pony, and we have last thing we talked about was I believe the idea of well, certainly discussed the far green country as an idea for a sort of a purgatory slash heaven place. We discussed what kind of nature Tom Bombadil possesses, and now we are going to go to Chapter 9 and see what we've got. So what's going on here, MM?
Well, what we have here on Chapter 9 is an island, really, an island chapter in the sea of all the drama that has been occurring. You know, we had the Old Forest, we had Old Man Willow, we had the Barrow Wights, we had a very bon vivant, colorful character like Tom Bombadil. And now that they're in this area, which is inhabited by what the hobbits call big folk, they do, and Tolkien goes into a great description on all of the lands here. Basically, these small lands around Bree, called Bree Land, there's small fields, there's, tamed forests, and it's not that big of an area. It goes into description of the men here, but the hobbits are here looking particularly for the Inn of the Prancing Pony, which is owned by Barlam and Butterbur, and Frodo is coming here because that is what Gandalf told him to do, to follow along with the plan. And it's done well in the movie as well, where they walk in and they knock on the door, and it's storming, and some very crotchety old man at the gate, suspicious like, questions them concerning their whereabouts, their nature, of who they are, hobbits. He repeats it to himself like he's trying to remember something someone said. And right away, the reader, and we're all humans, by the way, I'd like to mention that. We're all humans here, real human beings. And we have been familiarized and really relating to the hobbits for so long, you get jolted when you meet men for the first time in this book, even though we are humans, because they seem so foreign to what we've become accustomed to. They seem just not only with their size, but just slightly gruffer, and they, They make an imprint upon the land. They're noisy. They're considered to be, according to some hobbits in the Shire, dull and uncouth. But there's also hobbits living in Bree as well. Bree hobbits. And they're considered to be too mannish sometimes too, and only the most adventurous hobbits go to visit them. So that's my introduction to this forest, tamed forest and small cultivated land here in the northern region of Middle-earth.
And it seems, I don't think if I have this highlighted, but it seems like it's being set up as like a crossroads place, a place that is always going to be there, unshaken by what's going on around them, because they're kind of a place where people travel through, not travel to, but travel through. And as they approach Bree, you've mentioned the the guard, the man who's asked them for, what is your business here? And if we go back to, you also mentioned Peter Jackson's film. What I thought once they enter the Prancing Pony, what I thought was the striking difference between Peter Jackson's adaptation and the books is that I felt like in the books the inn is much more kind of lively and happy. You will remember in the film when you enter, it's set up as if all of them are kind of these weird spies, criminal chav types. All the people are looking at you funny, they're looking at the hobbits funny, and it's kind of a very tense atmosphere, isn't it? Whereas here,
yes, it's like a kind of bar you'd find in like a biker bar in the mountains of America.
Yeah, indeed, and there is definitely some of that, but not nearly as much as they portrayed in the films. And I'll just want to quote this little passage. As they hesitated outside in the gloom, someone began singing a merry song inside, and many cheerful voices joined loudly in the chorus. They listened to this encouraging sound for a moment, and then got off their ponies. The song ended, and there was a burst of laughter and clapping. So it definitely, doesn't. And later on, of course, Frodo will join them, won't he? In singing.
Yes, hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, right? The reoccurring motif in all of Tolkien's work, where the plot changes for better for worse around songs. That's what we're gonna find in this chapter.
Indeed,
that's for certain.
Indeed, and did you have something pointed out? Do you want to point out a particular passage before we come to the description of Aragorn, the Strider?
Yes, I could. I mean, I'll let you cover that, but I did want to mention how, there is this character, Barlaam Butterbur, who is just very well described when I think of an innkeep and when I think of anyone who works in this hospitality business and yet busy, yet always very excited to please people. I love the description of him. Again, it's Tolkien does these descriptions wonderfully. They led their ponies under the arch, and leaving them standing in the yard, they climbed up the steps. Frodo went forward and nearly bumped into a short, fat man with a bald head and a red face. He had a white apron on and was bustling out of one door and in through another, carrying a tray laden with full mugs. "Can we?" began Frodo. "Half a minute, if you please," shouted the man over his shoulder, and vanished into a babble of voices and a cloud of smoke. In a moment he was out again, wiping his hands on his apron. "Good evening, little master," he said, bending down. "What may you be wanting?" "Beds for 4 and stable for 5 ponies, if that can be managed." "Are you Mr. Butterbur?" "That's right. Barlaam, my name. Barlaam Butterbur, at your service. You're from the Shire, eh?" he said, and then suddenly he clapped his hand on his forehead as if trying to remember something. "Hobbits!" he cried. "Now what does that remind me of? Might I ask your name, sir?" So it seems like a simple thing, but Tolkien made the idea of a very busy person in the service industry quite accurately, because you're always forgetting things when you're in that line of work because you are so busy, and it's just like there's nothing you can do about it. And Barlaam's going to forget something very important to the plot. It is a shame because it could have saved a lot of time, but it's a simple thing here that even in this fantasy land, high fantasy land, you still have these very well grounded characters who are just they're as apple pie, and they're as cut and dry as humans in our real world. So that's my down to earth little example there of that.
And can I just point out? I think it happens shortly after the passage that you've described. But going back to the hobbits, he Sam, we described him as a kind of stereotypical almost hobbit, isn't he? And
Yes.
and I really like this passage where it is described how he says his suspicion is dispelled, and how does that happen? Well, let's read on. They were washed and in the middle of good deep mugs of beer when Mr. Butterbear and Nob came in again. In a twinkling, the table was laid. There was hot soup, cold meats, a blackberry tart, new loaves, slabs of butter, and half a ripe cheese. Good plain food, as good as the Shire could show, and homelike enough to dispel the last of Sam's misgivings, already much relieved by the excellence of the beer. So to him, the beer is what dispels the suspicion. To him, the homely food is what dispels the suspicion. If they really wanted to lure them in, if Sauron wanted to lure hobbits in, he would I think he would do well by just kidnapping a hobbit cook and then setting up some
Yeah.
setting up some traps for them
Yeah.
this way.
Ring raids, bed and breakfast.
Indeed, yeah.
That's what they're going to be doing. Yeah. Shire breakfast. Little cringy there, but yeah, you're right. It's just good food and beer is the way to get into the heart through the stomach, via the stomach of a hobbit. I want to touch upon something you mentioned. You mentioned the landlord Butterbur has these hobbit servants, which goes even more deeply into the nature of hobbits too. So it's like, again, this wouldn't work in a modern portrayal because you have two diminutives, two different, races, and there's definitely Bartleman is kind of ordering around these other hobbits, and they're very willing to help, and they're quite helpful throughout this chapter.
Yes, they are. This is something we mentioned right at the beginning, I believe, of our very first episode, and that is, this idea of a natural order that is there and that is not to be upset. We see that portrayed very keenly in Sam. Sam is the ultimate portrayal of that, the ultimate paragon of loyalty, of kind of kindness, of self-sacrifice, and really showcasing. I think honestly, it really does showcase the good sides of this rigid hierarchical system. What we've got today is
Yes.
a total bashing of it on every single turn. Everyone is. We mentioned this before. The society needs to be horizontal. Nobody has to be, or nobody. We shouldn't make it seem as though someone is subservient to someone else. Although ultimately that may be the case, but we need to play this game. Here, this game isn't really. This game, of course, is not played, but we see this natural reflection of that hierarchy that society has been used to for such a long time, but that our society has ultimately upset. We see that very clearly, and I think Tolkien makes a very good kind of portrayal of that. He shows you what kind of fruits can come from that relationship.
Yes, and Bree is an example of that. The hobbits and men, they live very much peacefully with each other, but they know each other's differences. They know each other's differences, and there is a sort of man hierarchy to what I gather from Bree land, and just from any land in Eriador, the lands of the north of Middle Earth, outside of the Shire. It's mostly a man-dominated world. At least when it's not abandoned in the places of wolves and orcs, because it says, in the common room of Barlam and Butterbur's Prancing Pony, you got even dwarves hanging out. You got, hobbits drinking side by side with men, and everyone is basically, all one in the common room. But as soon as our friends walk in, they're Merry, Pippin, and Frodo and Sam, all the hobbits start like cheering and shouting. They want to know immediately who their relatives are. Basically, they think they're relatives.
Yeah, and that harkens back to once again what the hobbits found particularly valuable, and we read that right at the beginning of the book. They find order within their genealogies particularly valuable. They want to know how they're related to hobbits who've passed. They want to know how they're related to hobbits around them, and they take real pride in keeping those records. don't they? And that is kind of a continuation of that. The first thing they do, Frodo sits down. They want to ask about the family. Where do you come from, etc., etc., thinking that perhaps they may be some kind of relatives, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I wanted to read this passage now regarding Aragorn, and I think that particularly in the books. Do you remember when they come in and Sam says, "Oh, look, this guy's been eyeing you ever
Yeah.
since we came in," and it shows this kind of figure in a cloak and a hood, and there's there's that iconic puff of the pipe which
Uh-huh.
illuminates his eyes.
Yes.
And just in general, to say something positive about the films in terms of the costuming, this is something you can take the plot apart and you can criticize it for this and that, but I think the costuming they did particularly well. I mean, in comparison to something like the Rings of Power, which we see now is just going to be absolutely ridiculous. They look Amazon-y, they look
Yeah.
plasticky, but the costumes and the characters in the films, they looked very well, and I believe that this passage which I'm about to quote is reflected very well in the way Aragorn looks in the films. And I quote: "Suddenly Frodo noticed that a strange-looking, weather-beaten man sitting in the shadows near the wall was also listening intently to the hobbit talk. He had a tall tankard in front of him and was smoking a long-stemmed pipe curiously carved. His legs were stretched out before him, showing high boots of supple leather and fitted him well, but had seen much wear and were now cracked with mud. A travel-stained cloak of heavy dark green cloth was drawn close about him, and in spite of the heat of the room he wore a hood that overshadowed his face, but the gleam of his eyes could be seen as he watched the hobbits." I believe that they've done particularly well in that particular scene, just costuming Aragorn. Do you agree?
Oh yeah. I think without a doubt that there is a very careful consideration taken towards the books. I mean, what a workshop was, I believe, the main prop provider
Mm-hmm.
and everything for the films based there in New Zealand, and they just did a wonderful job of making things look lived in, and just fitting what is described. It's just okay, wonderful. No need to change. It's what's written, and they did it well.
And that particular word, weather beaten, I thought they've very well reflected. His cloth was all weather beaten. It really was. He
Yeah.
looked like he's a strider. He's a ranger. He spends his time tracking prey or hunting or traveling through the forest through dangerous places. Not sitting in a castle somewhere 24/7.
Yeah, that is kind of the point of these rangers. The more you discover them, you do understand they're probably the most noble people living thousands of miles in any direction, but they do live in a sort of semi-nomadic lifestyle. And you wouldn't think about that on maybe first look. You maybe think, oh, they're just a bunch of how we think of the word ranger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Foresters or something. But
Yeah.
no, they're a lore drop, and they're really it's you could really spend a lot of time into their history, which is great. Like
Anything else
everything
in
in
this
here.
chapter?
Oh, well, heck yeah. I mean, this is again one of the first. I love this chapter because I love any chapters that explain naturally more about the world at
Mm-hmm.
large, and it is such a meeting place for people. You got dwarves who are obviously going to their places, or they're talking about wars and dark things, but there's also a large number of strangers.
Mm-hmm.
One of the travelers, a squint-eyed, ill-favored fellow, was foretelling that more and more people would be coming north in the near future. If room isn't found for them, they'll find it for themselves. They've a right to live, same as other folk, he said loudly. The local inhabitants did not look pleased at that prospect. Let me just say that's exactly what's happening to my place here. You got this arrogance, and there's this not very savory, what we call not very savory, sallow people trying to change things, and they're not just coming to pass through. They're not just coming to just be, wonderful dwellers of the local environment and to get along with all the denizens there. It's kind of just like a hostile takeover, and they're proud about it. I just always found this part, even before I became aware of political matters. That part always kind of creeped me out a bit, because this comes up, and they're sort of background characters, but you'll read about them again and later on in the other books, and it's not like they're going anywhere. They're not like they're going anywhere. They're going to stay.
Yes, and of course in this chapter we have this scene, which in the films was a pretty iconic scene, and I think made it into many of the posters of the Fellowship. And that is when Frodo in the film, he slips, does he not? When he sees
Yes.
that. When he's just that, was it Pippin or Merry? I always forget. He was in the
Pippin,
chatting.
yes, Frodo, yeah, Frodo.
Yeah. He basically revealed at the bar that I know a Baggins is Frodo Baggins, and he as he tries to kind of stop him from giving any more information, he slips, and the ring jumps out of his hand and is put on his finger, and he suddenly vanishes. Now here it is portrayed slightly differently, is it not? He sings. So he actually gets up and sings, doesn't he, on a table?
Yes, wasn't he like drinking, or right?
Yeah,
I believe
for sure. Yeah, he was kind of hanging out with the hobbits, wasn't he? And and then he started singing, I believe, as a distraction, as to provide a distraction to what is described here as Pippin's audience. And afterwards, where was it? I'm trying to find the place where he actually slipped.
Oh, you could sing the whole song for us if you like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. Would you like to?
No, thank you. I just thought you could do it. You sound more hobbity than I do.
Do I? I'll take it as a compliment.
I'm more of a dwarf. More of a dwarf. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so I think it's somewhere here. They made Frodo have another drink and then begin his song again, while many of them joined in, and that's, by the way, it's a pretty long song. For the tune was well known, and they were quick at picking up words. It was now Frodo's turn to feel pleased with himself. He capered about on the table, and when he came a second time to "The Cow Jumped Over the Moon," he leaped in the air, much too vigorously, where he came down, bang, into a tray full of mugs, and slipped and rolled off the table with a crash, clatter, and bump. The audience all opened their mouths wide for laughter, and stopped short in a gaping silence, for the singer disappeared. He simply vanished, as if he had gone slapped through the floor without leaving a hole. So in this sense, in the film, it's a very dramatic scene, isn't there? It's a very tense, dramatic scene.
Here, the music swirling.
Oh yeah, the music. But here, it's definitely on the humorous side, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. And it makes for a story, because all this time, the hobbits have a name disguise. Gandalf said, "Go by the name of Underhill. Tell no one your name, because the enemy spies are everywhere." So, and it's kind of funny too, because when you know people well in a certain area and you're trying to be disguised, it's almost impossible. They just pick up on traits. They'll pick up on cultural tics, or like shared local tics, personality tics. And this is a funny chapter for that, as well as a side note. But yeah, it busts open basically their identity, because now people are going to be talking about it. Where'd he go?
Anything else you wanted to point out?
Yes. Before we end the chapter here, right after he fell, I mentioned these strangers, these strangers that were there, and I'll basically say what happened was, right after he vanished, the local hobbits stared in amazement and then sprang to their feet and shouted for Barliman. All the company drew away from Pippin and Sam, who found themselves left alone in a corner and eyed darkly and doubtfully from a distance. It was plain that many people regarded them now as companions of a traveling magician of unknown powers and purpose. But there was one swarthy Breelander who stood looking at them with a knowing and half-mocking expression that made them feel very uncomfortable. Presently he slipped out of the door, followed by the squint-eyed southerner. The two had been whispering together a good deal during the evening, Harry, the gatekeeper, also went out just behind them. So all of these guys have been suspicious to the hobbits before, and they're all talking and conspiring, and now they all leave right after this. So keep that in mind as the plot goes on. All right, that's about it. Just wanted to fill that in.
Yeah, of course. And now we go into chapter number 10, which is Strider. So this is where we find out more about the identity of Aragorn, and also find out that, in fact, when it comes to Mr. Butterbur, Gandalf actually left him a letter to kind of, as he foresaw that Frodo may be staying there, didn't he? And so I think this is a very good time when we kind of start discussing the important character of Aragorn, and compare him to Peter Jackson's adaptation. Now,
Yes.
my interpretation is, and feel free afterwards to, of course, disagree with me, but in the films, it feels like he is hesitant. He's always hesitant to actually follow the path that is destined for him. You know, he is Isildur's heir. He is ultimately, he must be the king that returns. And I believe that in the films, for various reasons, which we may discuss, they kind of make it so that he's very hesitant to follow that path. You know, he's afraid of actually going down the path of Isildur, you know, to failing as he's done, to succumb to the temptation as he has done. Whereas in the films, and we'll see an example in this chapter, in the books, and we'll see an example of that in this chapter, when he ultimately reveals his identity after they read out the letter that Gandalf's written, he's very adamant about saying, look, I am Aragorn, I'm the one who's returned, you know. It feels like he's on board with the plan of returning. He's not hesitant. He has the broken sword, of course, with him at all times, and he kind of shows it to people as kind of almost like a brag, but you know, to show that he is the one. So I believe. What do you think is the reason for that diversion, and what do you think about the difference in portrayal?
Well, you know, the portrayal of Aragorn was changed, I don't believe, for a malicious purpose, but to make him more appealing. Now, people really love, you know, the underdog story. I don't need an underdog story. I know you probably don't, to make characters interesting. I just think they need to be well written. And but they did like that. You know, it'd be much more interesting to a broader audience to have a character who is kind of more. Everyone likes that kind of climb to gain success, a struggle, rather than like this born to rule type of attitude. And I wish it would have changed in both depictions, Tolkien and the adaptation. Aragorn has a certain level of world wariness. Now we know that he gets to live longer. His bloodline and those of his race get to live longer. But in the books, it's even more. He's even more grim in the books, and he is more world weary. Like, he's lived so long already. He's seen so much already, and he's fought. He's already come into his own. He's very mature. And in the movie, he really hasn't had like that maturing moment. In the movies, he doesn't really. In fact, it's all building up to the third movie where he sort of has that adoption of his birthright and of his lineage, all of that, his destiny, in I believe like the middle of the third movie. So it's a big difference, especially in like maturity levels there.
And well, just before we kind of start on the letter, I think the letter is one of the more important parts of this chapter. But remember, last episode, we talked about Frodo being more of a maybe perhaps a nobility, like a hobbit nobility, maybe not officially, but I mean, he's well off and he's looked up to, etc. And I'd just like to point out how Gandalf described him to Mr. Butterbur, and that's a stout little fellow with red cheeks, said Mr. Butterbur solemnly. That's him talking to the hobbits. Frodo wanted to prove to him that he, in fact, knows Gandalf, and in fact, he can be trusted. And he goes on, that won't help you much. It goes for most hobbits. Barley, that's Pippin answering. But this one is taller. than some and fairer than most, and he has a cleft in his chin. Perky chap with a bright eye. Begging your pardon, but he said it, not me. So I think it's kind
Yeah,
of a taller, he's taller, he's more fair than most hobbits. What do you think
yeah,
about the description?
yeah. It's like the physiognomy traits of nobility, or at least what should be. Right? It's not the let's just say the more earthy, sturdy type. It's the more kind of lofty. If he was a man, equestrian, he'd ride a horse. He'd be like very much a man of culture, and that's what he is. He looks like a man of culture, and Tolkien is he's putting two and two together, and he's adding up. He's making things add up. He's not like oh, he's the Hunchback of Notre Dame. No, he is a noble. He's born. He's born to a good bloodline, to a good house, to a certainly odd house, but definitely a noble one, if you will, Shire nobility.
Anything before the letter?
Yes. So of course there's this biting back and forth, like this really sharp, very witty banter. Some of the best in the whole stuff between Frodo and Aragorn. Not only banter, it's just intelligent conversation. And Strider mentions, which is what he's known as because he strides on his two legs. That's what they call him. That's what the hobbits always call him, basically, for the most part. And they mention, Aragorn says how there's black riders. They've been seen on the highways around there. These are the ones that have been obviously chasing them and stalking them, that were only driven off by the intercession of Gildor. And, we're going to see them come back. Of course, their threat is rising. And then he also mentions how there's this man named Bill Ferny, evil-looking guy that we mentioned in the past chapter. He has some of his friends that we saw there too, and they are sort of basically I don't know what you call them, the criminal element in the town, if you will, and to watch out for them. Watch out for these people. You got to keep your head down, and your trick didn't do you any service. And then Aragorn, Strider, he goes on to describe himself a little bit and what he's done, and he's very cryptic, very grim. He's very grim, but he's not mean. There's a kindness to him as well. And he basically says, "You'll have to trust me. Trust me. You'll never get to Elrond of Rivendell, where Gandalf wanted you to go, on your own. And if you don't trust me, here it is, and then the letter, right? This is what you need to know." And of course, our dear, forgetful, bumbling, plump Butterbur was to blame for the letter not getting read sooner. And if it had been, it would have saved a lot of problem.
Indeed. So I think I'll read through the letter because I really find it kind of almost amusing, isn't there? There is well, first of all, the existence of the PS, the PPS, and the PPPS I thought was it was slightly amusing. I mean, the postscripta take up more than the actual letter.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an indication of of Gandalf.
I never noticed that till now.
Maybe that's an indication of Gandalf. Of course, we know him as a Maya, right? He's a spirit.
Yes.
He's kind of almost a godly being. But also, he's an old man, isn't he? He's that in an old man's body. And so, he writes this letter, and then I forgot to mention that, and then he writes a PS. Oh yeah, and I also should mention that, and he writes a PPS. I thought it was quite amusing. But the letter goes thus: "The Prancing Pony, Bree, mid-year's day, Shire year 1418. Dear Frodo, bad news has reached me here. I must go off at once. You had better leave Bag End soon, and get out of the Shire before the end of July at latest. I will return as soon as I can, and I will follow you if I find that you are gone. Leave a message for me here if you pass through Bree. You can trust the landlord, Butterbur. You may meet a friend of mine on the road, a man, lean, dark, tall, by some called Strider. He knows our business and will help you. Make for Rivendell. There I hope we may meet again. If I do not come, Elrond will advise you. Yours in haste, Gandalf." And then there's a little rune afterwards. P.S. So here's the first one. Do not use it again. For any reason whatever. Do not travel by night. And it is capitalized, meaning the ring, of course. P.P.S. Make sure that it is the real Strider. There are many strange men on the roads. His true name is Aragorn. And then he gives a poem to describe him. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken. A light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king. And then it goes on with the PPPS. I hope Butterbur sends this promptly. A worthy man, but his memory is like a lumber room. Thing wanted, always buried. If he forgets, I shall roast him. Farewell. that last line I always found to be particularly amusing.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, he's just like, I shall roast him. Farewell.
So yeah, your thoughts?
Yeah, truly. Well, certainly I have a lot to say about that poem, and even before it was the poem was misappropriated for every single generic bumper sticker and Instagram caption or bio. It is really, can't you really just use this paragraph to describe Aragorn, Strider? Like, this is basically his life at this point. This is who he is. All of these things. He's crownless, but he shall be king. His blade is broken, but it shall be renewed. All of these things are going to happen. They're all going to happen, and they do mention though they got to test out his real name. And that is Aragorn. They haven't found that out yet so far. So far, Strider sort of took them and forcefully had a conversation with them about these things because he realized they were in big, big trouble. And of course, Butterbur, by the way, he's made a mess of things, and that is what Frodo basically says that he's made a mess because if he had sent them much earlier, so much could have been avoided. In fact, they probably would have out.
Yeah. There is something I wanted to look a bit deeper into the poem itself because I think it gives a good description, like line by line of the nature of Aragorn. You've already touched upon it, but just to kind of look at it linguistically, right? All that is gold does not glitter, and that of course harkens to when they'll actually leave the Prancing Pony, when they'll leave into the wild, as he says. The hobbits talk among each other, and they say, I believe it was Frodo, and he says something along the lines of, if he was really an enemy, he would seem fairer and smell fouler, something along those lines, right? And this is how this poem opens. All that is gold does not glitter. Aragorn, he may be in these ripped apart clothes, he may be this kind of rough guy with dirty boots, etc., but that is what Gandalf warns against. He warns against kind of judging him by that image, and he says not all those who wander are lost, right? So once again referring to him as almost kind of you mentioned the nomadic lifestyle, right? It's almost like an exile.
Yes.
And particularly I like the third and the fourth line. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. So here, I mean, this is almost this can almost be appropriated as a motto for conservatism. It's like this is why we place value in things that are old, not for some random reason. It is because they stand the test of time, do they not? That is why we put faith in institutions that are old. And obviously that's an extrapolation, but that's kind of a general principle. Not the old that is strong does not wither, which of course, I mean, in our day and age, it's a total inversion. But deep roots are not reached by the frost. Once again, there is a security that kind of being rooted, rooted in tradition, rooted in history, rooted in family, etc. And here it's definitely rooted in history. It's rooted in bloodline, isn't it? That's where Aragorn is finding his legitimacy. From the ashes a fire shall be woken, a light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king. And you mentioned the crownless again shall be king. Once again, this is quite obvious. And renewed shall be blade that was broken. I believe this poem was actually um, in the films. It was used in the Return of the King when they were reforging the blade, right? And
Yes.
that was Arwen, I believe, saying that, delivering
Yep.
this poem. Either
Mm.
Arwen or Elrond. I can't quite believe it. I
I
think it
believe it
was
was
Arwen.
Darwin.
Yeah, she's delivering this, but of course, in the books, the blade is going to be reforged immediately when they all arrive at the Council of Elrond. Is it not? Afterwards, it will be reforged.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah.
That's what's going to happen there.
Yes. So an interesting kind of difference in the films. I believe they've done it in the films. There's this once again. There's this hesitation about Aragorn that they've wanted to portray in the films, and that was kind of a last push. Elrond coming to him, showing him the blade, and saying, this is it. Now is the time. It's kind of a big climactic moment where
Hmm.
he really leaves the Aragorn the Strider behind, and he puts on the mantle of king, which all this time he was hesitant to do. So we see
Yeah.
here this is a very important poem for the future, to see what Aragorn is really about, in the nature of his character.
True. And I do want to say that Viggo Mortensen did do a spectacular did do a spectacular job portraying Aragorn, though. I really can't separate the
Hmm.
character from the book from that image. Same with Gandalf.
Yes.
Really, it's just like this. It's just who he is.
Yes.
He's a very noble looking man as well. It's not just like you got some kind of random actor who looks like a Hollywood character. No, Vigo looks like he could be from like an old portrait, an old painting.
And
Historic.
afterwards they kind of discuss this letter, do they not? And Aragorn, let me. Do you have anything after the letter, or they want to point out? I'm looking for a passage. Um,
Mm, not particularly, but I do have one that I can remember later on towards the end of the chapter. There is one concerning Sam, though, because
mhm.
Sam isn't, he's not taking really Strider's bait that he's the guy, you know, and so Strider answers this. He goes, "That you are a stout fellow," answered Strider, "but I am afraid my only answer to you, Sam Gamgee, is this. If I had killed the real Strider, I could kill you, and if I should have killed you already without so much talk. If I was after the ring, I could have it. Now." He stood up and seemed suddenly to grow taller. In his eyes gleamed a light, keen and commanding. Throwing back his cloak, he laid his hand on the hilt of a sword that had hung concealed by his side. They did not dare to move. Sam sat wide-mouthed, staring at him dumbly. "But I am the real Strider, fortunately," he said, looking down at them with a face softened by a sudden smile. "I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and if by life or death I can save you, I will."
That's
Oh, that is
Yeah, that is in fact the passage I
so
was
good.
looking for. Interestingly enough,
Mm.
and yeah, I think to when he stands up and it says, he seems to suddenly grow taller, and he uses his, almost kingly name, the Aragorn, son of Arathorn, to indicate his nobility almost. And if by life or death I can save you, I will. Kind of almost taking this kind of vow, this almost solemn vow that they would take in the films at the Council of Elrond, if I'm not mistaken. And I think you can see that this is a bit of a different Aragorn in this particular scenario. He stands up and he has this. He already portrays this kingly nature of his, whereas in the films you see that he's much more reserved about that side of him for now.
Yeah, do you even see it in the first film? I'm trying to remember. Do you see Aragorn act in a way that is how he is in the books? I don't believe you do.
No, no, and interesting because during the Council of Elrond in the films, of Boromir stands up and asks, who are you? And Legolas stands up and says, "He's Aragorn, son of Arathorn. You owe him your allegiance." And
Yeah.
then Aragorn says in Elvish, he says, "Sit down, Legolas," and kind of, he doesn't. It seems like he just doesn't want that quite yet. He's not quite ready, to stand up and say, "Yes, actually, Boromir, you do owe me your allegiance. I am
Yeah.
the king that will return," and basically, shut up. This is a totally different
Yeah.
Aragorn. It seems to me.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's good. It's good you pointed that out, and that's why I do prefer the books always, is because you get the true blue, and seeing how scary Strider is, how scary Aragorn is. He wasn't just showing an example; he was almost like inhabiting, if he was an enemy, like who he would be. And so Sam was just like mouth open. I'm sure that he was just like, oh my. So but yeah, they do believe him. The hobbits more or less do believe him. And Strider laughs. I'll just continue with this last thing. He says, I see. I look foul and feel fair. Is that it?
Oh, there you
All
go.
that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. Did the verses apply to you then? Asked Frodo. I could not make out what they were about, but how did you know that they were in Gandalf's letter if you have never seen it? I did not know, he answered, but I am Aragorn, and those verses go with that name. Wow.
Well, yeah.
That says it.
Clearly he's not ashamed of his status, as a Isildur's heir, in the books. And can I just my theory, by the way, as to why they made this change, is it is connected to a different change that they made, which is to give Arwen a larger role in the films, right? She possesses
Mm,
much more of an impact in the films, and of course the runtime in the films than she does in the books. And I think they basically needed something for her to do. And I think that kind of
mm.
inner conflict within Aragorn was brewed up so that because she is the one who almost helps him deal with it in the films, does she not? She's always the one who
Yes.
reassures him. She's always the one who kind of tries to use her love towards him, and says, you're Isildur's heir and not Isildur himself. I don't want to jump too much in the future, but I think as these scenes are so connected, I would be mistaken to not mention it. But that line which she delivers to Aragorn, you're Isildur's heir, not Isildur himself. That is something that Aragorn himself says during the Council of Elrond in the books. So he doesn't need
That.
Arwen to say that, obviously in the books.
Oh
He already
man,
knows
yeah.
that. He already has decided. He knows he's kingly. He knows that is his destiny. But I think that was that conflict, that inner conflict within Aragorn was created so that and to be fair, Aragorn is not perfect. We'll see in the Mines of Moria, especially after Gandalf dies.
Mhm.
He's hesitant to take leadership of the company, but that's kind of running ahead. But that particular conflict within him, I believe, was kind of created to give Arwen actually something to do. And to be fair, I'm saying it, and it may sound as though it's a criticism. I mean, it may be insofar as the portrayal isn't totally accurate to the books, but insofar as they did change it and what they have actually done, I enjoyed it. I thought when I was watching it many years ago, and as I'm rewatching it, I don't think it's particularly kind of you know thrown at you out of the blue. I think they set it up from the very beginning, and I think that conflict is played out well. And if you were going to give Arwen something to do, I think that was a good way of doing it.
Yes, and there's I used to like hate it when I was a kid, those scenes, because I thought they were filler. I'm like, I
Hmm.
just want to get back to Uruk-hai hack and slash, please. Um, but there is plenty of good dialogue even with this changed characters. I can't remember exactly the quote from the movies. What does Aragorn say? I give hope to men, but I leave none for myself, or I keep none for
Hmm.
myself. That is such a good quote. And another thing too, Aragorn in the books, he's like we mentioned, he's not hesitant, but he is humble. He's truly humble. He's not arrogant.
Hmm.
So, perhaps they could have done it better if they made him more humble with it. But yeah, he's already in his zone. But he never talks down to Boromir
No.
concerning this lineage, concerning his kingliness. He does treat him like a brother. He treats him like a peer,
Yes.
and that's what I like. They are pretty close in status, but
He's truly
it's
noble, isn't he? That's what he
he
is.
is. He's aspirational, right?
Yes.
Hmm.
And then towards the end of this chapter, I think it's in this chapter that they actually acquire Bill, the pony. Isn't that right? Or is that going to be in
Yes.
the next chapter?
I'm pretty sure it's. Let me go see. It's in the next chapter.
Oh,
It
it's in
has
the
to
next
be.
chapter. Yeah.
Has to
Okay.
be the next chapter. Yeah,
All right.
I think in the end of this chapter, Mary got ambushed. Correct? Or he fainted. He
Oh yes,
fainted.
he fainted. Yes, he was
Yes. I mean, I
outside of
don't.
Bree, wasn't he? He was kind of just walking about, and
Yes,
then
in
he lost
in the town.
consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he spotted something jumping over a fence. He spotted a dark figure, which yeah is not good if you know by now. Dark figures and shadows with cloaks and but yeah, but he fainted and the hobbits bring him back, and that's what brings him back to the group. And that's um he might, who knows what have happened, but the hobbit servants found him, and now all the hobbits are together. Strider's there, and they go to sleep. If I don't think there is a an ambush scene in in the book where they stab the beds, but that's still it's a wonderful scene. It's really good because it's such a fake out. It's such a fake out. When people are watching it for the first time, it always kind of it does the switch, does the old switcheroos on them.
Yeah, the way they alternate, looking at Hobbit sleeping and then Nazgul walking into the room, and when they start stabbing the pillars, um, it shows Sam waking up. Obviously, he wakes up from the noise, but if you were watching
Yeah.
it for the first time, you would be really surprised. I honestly I can't recall the first time I've seen the films, so I wouldn't know how it feels like exactly. But I think in terms of cinematography, I think that was done pretty well. I quite enjoyed that little scene.
Oh, choreographed. Yeah, the Nazgul, they're like they're wonderfully choreographed. Every time they show up, I think that's like part of their that's part of their spirit, right? Their ghoulish ethos, right? We have to show up looking formidable in a certain ranking. Yeah, because they're just spooky that way. They're not just like random flailing ghosts. They are very ordered,
Yeah, I
very
don't think we've
purposeful.
I don't think we've discussed this in the first part, but what do you think about the design? Once again, the costume, the design of the Nazgul in the films.
I think it's awesome. I think
Hmm.
a lot of films rip it off to this day, including
Yes.
Harry Potter. Harry Potter ripped it off.
Hmm.
Um, for their Dementors.
Yes.
But yeah, you like my snort of
Yeah,
disgust.
I like it.
But it's such a simple design and it works. It really works. Everything about the Nazgul is perfect, I believe. The design, their sounds, their speed, their movements. It looks very supernatural-ish. And especially if they want to remain hidden too, because they are kind of disembodied spirits given shape.
Mm. And I quite like their kingly versions as well. Once they're on the weather top, we'll probably
Oh
discuss.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. That yeah, we are. We're at a super long chapter.
Yes.
Um in fact, I believe it's almost 30 pages. No, it's
Uh,
23 pages. My apology. 23 pages just about.
yeah. That is the knife in
So,
the dark, is what you're talking about.
yeah, well it
Yes.
depends
Yes.
which version you have. It depends how big of my little pocket Lord of the Rings. It's 23 pages.
Oh yeah, I see. I see. Yeah, I've got kind of a pocket version myself that I make annotations in. But as far as chapter 10 is concerned, with the whole Bree meeting of Strider, anything else in the end of the chapter you wanted to point out, or do you want to move on to Knife in the Dark?
Um, I think that's about it. Uh, I really do think that's about it. All I know is just want to impress upon you guys is everything that you love about the films and the movies, like little characters like Butterbur. If you haven't read the books yet, I mean, you really should, because it goes in depth into these characters and into their jobs, into their friends, into their workers like Nob and Bob. So yeah, if you watch the movies and you think that it's like, oh, I know everything there is to know and I can just watch that and get enjoyment, you'll find boatloads more in every chapter, and this is just proof of it. You get all these great Hobbit characters outside of the Shire. So that's my 2 cents too. I just want people to read more. I'm a big reader.
Yeah, definitely read more. And I think that it's interesting that when I reread the books, to me, as you mentioned that before, is how the casting was so good in the films that I try my best to kind of, in my mind's eye, to give my own interpretation to the characters, but I just can't
Mhm.
overwrite the Gandalf of Macallan. I just can't override the
Oh,
Saruman. I can't override the Aragorn. It's just not possible. The costuming, the cast
yeah.
is just too good.
And I think to some degree, even artists like, Alan Lee and all these other wonderful ones, they almost like bent their imagination after the films released when they were painting or drawing about Lord of the Rings. It almost takes inspiration from the films, at least from the aesthetics of certain characters.
Oh
It
yeah,
just happens, I think, subconsciously.
and Peter Jackson was so lucky to get Alan Lee on board, was he not? I mean, the ultimate Tolkien artist.
No.
You can really see uh, an artist's stroke in this film. It's very picturesque, is it not? The Shire, the all of the
Yes.
panoramic shots, and of course the
Yeah.
designs. Once again, the designs are excellent. So in any case, Knife in the Dark. So this is something we don't see. I think this is the stand-in you mentioned recently. That Nazgul attack Bree. Yes. Um,
Mm.
uh,
Well, yeah. Hmm. Sorry,
in
sorry, I
the
didn't mean to interrupt.
films. No. So
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, in the films they attack Bree, right? But here in Knife in the Dark, it starts off by uh, kind of looking at the Quick Hollow, the house, right? The
Yeah.
Frodo's new house, and with Fatty Bulger, I believe he was staying there, and so
Hmm.
it was, I believe the Nazgul actually attacked, and this is where we see, uh, awake, fear, fire, foes, awake. This is where
Yes.
we see the description that of I believe the bell ringing, the bell that that hasn't sounded in a long time. Kind of the emergency we're being attacked bell, is to a surprise, to a surprise, or to the Hobbit's surprise, certainly, is being sounded. And I always thought it interesting that it's not usual that the representatives, if you will, if I can use that word, of Mordor, makes it sound like, I don't know, they're salesmen or something. But
It's
those,
true, right?
but the orcs of the orcs of Mordor, the servants of Sauron, they don't usually talk in the films, do they? I mean, they usually make like shrieking sounds, or they make these horrible sounds. uh
Yes.
Probably the one that talks the most is well, I mean, Saruman, maybe, if you want to consider him a servant of Sauron. But also,
Yeah.
at the end, it's the mouth of Sauron, right, that we kind of get most of
Ah,
like the
yes.
dialogue. But here we see, let's take a look. There was a faint stir in the leaves, and a cock crowed far away. The cold hour before dawn was passing. The figure by the door moved. In the dark, without moon or stars, a drawn blade gleamed, as if a chill light had been unsheathed. Just stopping here for a moment. Every time, I think close to every time, Tolkien comes to the description of Nazgul, and especially their weapons, and we'll see it at Weathertop, there is always some kind of a freezing metaphor. There is also some kind of a
Mm.
frost present, some coldness to them,
Yes.
which I find to be particularly in character, yeah, of course. Um, it goes on, there was a blow, soft but heavy, and the door shuddered. Open in the name of Mordor, said a voice thin and menacing. At a second blow, the door yielded and fell back, with timbers burst and lock broken. The black figures passed swiftly in. As at that moment, amongst the trees nearby, a horn rang out. It rent the night like fell on a hilltop. Awake, fear, fire, foes, awake. And it goes on with the response. But go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, so that's great right there. This is in Buckland. Remember, Fredegar, aka Fatty Bulger, stayed behind. He didn't want to go to the Old Forest. He's watching Crick Hollow, and the net of the Nazgul is enclosing. It's really enclosing around the hobbits, and so they
Mm-hmm.
found out where the bait and switch house was. That's why they attacked this. So Fatty Bulger, as soon as he had seen, it says here, the shapes creep from the garden, he knew that he must run for it or perish. And
Mm-hmm.
so he ran as quickly as he could. He alerted everyone, and the Brandy Bucks of Buckland, they're the most adventurous, the most, you could say, collectivized or somewhat organized under a central authority. They sounded their horn call, and they said it hadn't sounded for 100 years. And that's when they tried to alert themselves, but there's kind of a they don't catch the Black Riders. It's kind of interesting. But it says, the Black Riders rode like a gale to the North Gate. Let the little people blow. Sauron would deal with them later. Meanwhile, they had another errand, and they knew that the house was empty. The ring had gone. They rode down the guards at the gate and vanished from the Shire. Did they trample the guards? Did they kill hobbits? I
Well,
think they
just like
did.
they did in the film. Do you remember when they broke into Bree and they killed that guard
Yeah,
that
they
was at the gate?
yeah, yes. But I think they did. Okay, yeah, that's right. But in the book, it's hobbits, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
It's
feel
interesting.
sorry for that hobbit.
It's interesting. I feel like the Nazgul. I don't think we see that particularly well reflected in the films, but I think here there is a description of them. Maybe it will come soon. Maybe we've already passed it in the first part, but they're described as. I'm sure I have this passage somewhere, but they're described as quite cowardly. And that's the reason why they, for example, the black figures fled from the house. If there are
Hmm.
these impressive kings of old, which is what they are, wraiths, the servants of Sauron, kind of almost his elite, are they not? Like, why are they fleeing? Why are they so frightful? And that
Well,
is
it's a secret
ultimately,
mission, right?
yeah, it's a secret mission, but I mean, also it's kind of Tolkien talks about that goes back to the nature of evil and good.
Mhm.
The nature of evil is, of course, in my interpretation, a part of it is extreme, selfishness. It's kind of it's not for them to sacrifice something of their own, even if they're kind of almost
Uh,
slaves to serve, but they will try to keep their lives. They will try to look out for their own interest beyond anything else, even in their servitude. And that is kind of the nature of evil. That noble, valiant self-sacrifice, go reach the goal no matter what, is just not an essence of evil. I feel like
yeah,
that
they're
could
very.
have something to do with that.
They're self-preservationists in a way, and their movements, I think, can best be described as furtive.
Hmm.
They're furtive. They're always
Yes.
looking very suspicious. They slink away when another person, and it really makes sense that they would only attack at night.
Hmm.
That they would attack in the wilds. They wouldn't want to break down a city. That's not their MO. It's not their modus operandi. That it wouldn't work. It would be too dangerous. And I think their time is coming to be over. It's definitely going to be coming, but
Hmm.
they only get that from Sauron's power growing as well. It's not just, they are kind of weak compared. They're so weak in actually the first movie. I mean, Aragorn fights them off with a torch.
Yes.
One angry Dunedain with a torch destroys the nine.
Indeed.
Imagine what Glorfindel could do.
um, and this is now we come to the realization that all the ponies that were brought to the hobbits by Tom Bombadil, they're all gone, aren't they? This is we're back in Bree now, and
Mm.
these hobbits, these ponies are all gone, and so this is where they decide to actually go ahead. And purchase this pony at an extortionist price from Bill Ferny, do they not?
Yes, the real honorable, upright citizen of Bree, Bill Ferny, whose house is shuttered up and totally not suspicious at all.
Let's take a look at the descriptions. The description of the pony that they're purchasing. Bill Ferny's price was 12 silver pennies, and that was indeed at least 3 times the pony's value in those parts. It proved to be a bony, underfed, and dispirited animal, but it did not look like dying just yet.
Oh man.
Mr. Butterbur paid for it himself and offered Mary another 18 pence as some compensation for the lost animals. He was an honest man, and well off as things were reckoned in Brie, but 30 silver pennies was a sore blow to him, and being cheated by Bill Ferny made it harder to bear. And then, interestingly enough, Tolkien goes ahead and points out that in fact later on, the ponies, he will find the ponies, and he will sell them and kind of recoup a part of his loss. So kind of, always found that to be a very interesting little passage because, because he's introduced to us as an honest man, and it's sad to see him being uh, kind of ripped off like that by Bill and having lost these ponies through no fault of his own. And
Yes.
Tolkien comes in and kind of reassures us, guys, it's gonna be fine. This honest man, this forgetful man that really deserves a roasting by Gandalf, he's gonna be well. He's gonna be good. The ponies will come back and he'll recoup his loss. So I've kind of was always interested in that little reassurance that he gives. Perhaps he thought that people would quite like this character in the end.
Yes, Tolkien dots his I's and crosses his T's. A lot of authors and writers would very merrily just leave behind a wreckage of loose ends and unfinished character arcs and just anything that is not necessary to their main plot and protagonist. They oftentimes just leave in disarray. But Tolkien doesn't. He always just, finishes off things perfectly. Perfectly. And it's his attention to detail like this is just like, beautiful. Beautiful. And I like how you brought that up. Or Butterbur got ripped off for an underfed thing that was just not feeling like dying yet.
It's very different to the one you see the portrayal in the film. It's a very kind of cute, well-fed, kind of proper pony, isn't it? But here we read a bony and not dying just yet. Yeah, brilliant. Just straight afterwards, and then I'll let you kind of go. This is one of the themes that is perhaps introduced or reintroduced. I don't think we've mentioned this, but this concept of memory. This maybe we talked about it tangentially, but this concept of memory, and almost I can say maybe nostalgia, and this will happen multiple times in the books, and it's almost like it gives a feeling of that quest, that journey that is that hits at the very end of the book, where the hobbits will come back to the Shire, but ultimately Frodo will not be able to live a life as he used to live it in the Shire. There really is no coming back from this adventure of his. And I think that this theme is being introduced here, and take a read of this. They said farewell to Nob and Bob, and took leave of Mr. Butterbow with many thanks. I hope we shall meet again some day, when things are merry once more, said Frodo. I should like nothing better than to stay in your house in peace for a while. And so there are multiple points in the books. I think that it happens in Lothlorien as well, where Frodo says something similar. He says, I wish when all this is done, I would like to come back and kind of spend some time here. And there are definitely multiple times where this happens, and it kind of hints to the opposite, to me at least. My interpretation is, he captures these memories, and at the end, all he will have of these paths that he's visited, the places that he's seen, they all become but memories, and he will never be able to actually come back and enjoy them in peace, as he says. He will not, because that quest would change him forever.
Yes, the way I can use this too. I've seen this done as kind of like a way of almost telling the future in a hidden manner. You're gonna have it in films, especially in films where you have a character say something like this, and it kind of like, oh my goodness, now I know something bad's gonna happen here. Or they go, oh, I'd love to come back here and raise a family or something, and you're like, oh, okay, they're setting this guy to die. But here with Frodo, it's like, already, as the ring bearer, and this thing is already, if you're just reading it for the first time or watching, it's got some immense powers. He's gonna come back a changed man, and this is sort of like, this is a goodbye forever, and it's now
there's
a memory.
A sadness there, isn't there? There's a sadness that you read this, and even when you read this for the first time, I believe you know that's not going to happen. It's as you've said precisely. It's as if he's saying goodbye forever, and it almost feels like every time he says goodbye, it feels like it's forever. There's this sadness about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's basically a lot of this. There's a lot of this sadness here, and well,
but plays well to his nature, doesn't it? Of this like thoughtful, lost in his thoughts kind of hobbit, unusual.
He's very introspective too. He's always thinking.
Indeed.
Well,
go ahead. What's next in the chapter?
Yeah, so they're all leaving. They're leaving the area, and obviously they've attracted a lot of attention. Strider's with them. He's kind of a local celebrity to some degree, in different ways of thinking that word. But as they're walking away, and they're always well, the pony's already looking less dejected, and Sam has taken a liking to him,
Mm-hmm.
and they see some strange people. Right, yet again, they see these Southerners who they describe as being more half like a goblin. And yet again, they see another dark-looking man. Well, not really. We don't know, but he had heavy black brows, dark, scornful eyes, and his large mouth curled in a sneer. He was smoking a short black pipe. As they approached, he took it out of his mouth and spat. "Morning's Longshanks," he said. "Off early? Found some friends at last?" Strider nodded, but did not answer. And he goes on a bit. He says, "And you, Sammy, don't go ill-treating my poor old pony." Bah! He spat again. Sam turned again quickly. "And you, Fernie," he said, "put your ugly face out of sight or it will get hurt." With a sudden flick, quick as lightning, an apple left his hand and hit Bill square on the nose. He ducked too late, and curses came from behind the hedge. "Waste of a good apple," said Sam regretfully, and strode on. So hilarious. That's the stubborn, loyal to a fault Sam, as we know, who's very caring as well. He doesn't like these nasty types who take joy in basically insulting or being mean or bullies or stuff like that. He's a protector. He's a protector type.
Yeah.
I'm happy he hit him. Waste of a good apple though.
Yeah, it really is. And speaking of the hobbits, once again we go back to the importance of the Shire, the importance of your of the patria, the importance of the land that you come from. And once again,
Yes.
we mentioned in part one how the hobbits will keep referring to Bag End in their minds, keep looking back in order to grant them, in order for that memory to grant them the strength. And this is just an example of that, one of many. All that day they plodded along until the cold and early evening came down. The land became drier and more barren, but mists and vapors lay behind them on the marshes. A few melancholy birds were piping and wailing until the round red sun sank slowly into the western shadows. Then an empty silence fell. The hobbits thought of the soft light of sunset glancing through the cheerful windows of Bag End far away. Once again, what do they think about? What do they think about that can help them get through this?
It's home, even the memory
home.
of it.
It is home, and
one day you'll return.
Yeah, shortly afterwards, and I think you'll be best poised to give a take on this. Strider sang, didn't he? There's
yes, he does
with a low voice. And what does he sing about?
Well, he's singing about the lore of the Elder Days, and he's singing about Gil Galad, and Gil Galad. It's a very famous one. He's an elven king. Of him, the harpers sadly sing. It's a very short like song or poem.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of it, though, Sam, believe it or not, finishes it too.
Mm-hmm.
Which is I don't think. Wait, was it Strider who even? Wait, Sam said the whole thing, or was it?
Let's see. The hobbits gazed at Strider. It seemed that he was learned in old lore as well as in the ways of the wild. "Who was Gil-galad?" asked Mary, but Strider did not answer, and seemed to be lost in thought. Suddenly, a low voice murmured. So, yeah, I think it was him. Yes.
Yes, I totally misread that. My goodness, all this time reading, I never knew. I thought just Sam finished it, but no, he's quite adept at it as well. Because as we've seen, he's kind of the understudy to Frodo.
Yes.
And to Bilbo, and obviously Bilbo isn't he kind of like Tolkien in the lore? Like he writes all of the Elder Days history. Tolkien kind of imposed himself. I'm pretty sure he did, but it works.
It does.
But I love that. I love how Sam and Frodo are elf files. They're Eldar files. if you will, lovers of the elven culture.
Uh, yeah, once again, this kind of uh, they are the thinker types, aren't they? And
Mhm.
it seems like, well, it doesn't seem like it, but Tolkien said it himself. It's his world is very elf-centric, isn't it? Kind of they are the main deal. They're kind of the main storyline. They're the main race that kind of
Yep.
keep the story of the world going. Um, and there's this fascination that Sam especially has for elves, right? That was kind of his dream, his
Yes.
long thought about dream. I just want to see the elves and their greatness, etc. Which he did fulfill. We spoke about this in part one, right? He did fulfill it, and yet he moved past that. He moved past that fascination to realize that there is something that else that he needs to do, namely to carry this to carry this burden together with Frodo. And he didn't say it kind of overtly explicitly, but this is you can understand that by his words, and we can definitely see that Strider has some. He's not just a man, is he? Well, we know that he is a Dunedain, right? That he has definitely more of an elvish kind of quality about him, right? There's once again it talks about him being learned in old lore.
Hmm.
So he's definitely lived in that lore more so than the hobbits would or the men.
Truly, yes. But I feel like the hobbits take to things they take to things so naturally and so well. Everything that they do. They do learn, you could say. I didn't mean to say that. They just like they're wonderful at it. Like it's even to some degree, except maybe really like physical prowess or fighting. But they're singing. The hobbits they become good singers, or they just are, in my opinion. Um, Heck, the study of ancient lore, of taking an interest in it and really mastering it and writing books that are only there in the Shire eventually.
Yeah, and
It's
thinking about it that way,
yeah.
it does make sense that that some hobbits would be so interested in the elves, right? They would have a natural inclination to learn more about elves because they are rooted. Hobbits are rooted in the past. We've talked about this last time. We've talked about it in this episode as well. And if you're that type, if you're a type that enjoys history, that finds value in it, in your lineage, you know, you must in the end kind of get to discovering something that is, most ancient, and namely that's elves, isn't it? They're kind of um, the anchor between the past and the present in Middle Earth. So it's only natural, it seems to me, that they would be interested in elves and in their lore.
Hmm. Yeah, it comes as no surprise. Well, some hobbits would think you silly. Some hobbits would think, hey, get your nose out of that nonsense, okay?
Absolutely.
Go back to your field.
Not Bilbo or Frodo though, for sure.
No, no, not the best, not the cream of the crop, okay? Not the other ones are Ted Sandyman, okay?
Yeah,
The Sackville Baggins.
yeah, they're definitely not. The working classes may not have this fascination, if I can use that term.
Yes, yes, they
Um,
don't.
let's see now. What do I have next? That is highlighted. I've got this passage. They stood for a while silent on the hilltop near its southward edge. In that lonely place, Frodo for the first time fully realized his homelessness and danger. He wished bitterly that his fortune had left him in the quiet and beloved Shire. He started down at the hateful road leading back westward to his home. Suddenly he was aware that two black specks were moving slowly along it, going westward, and looking again he saw that three others were creeping eastward to meet them. He gave a cry and clutched Strider's arm. So I think I pointed this out, and that goes into what we've just said. This longing for the Shire, and this in that lonely place, Frodo for the first time fully realized his homelessness and danger. So this is we're kind of, it seems to me, we're done with, oh, calm down, Sam. We're just going, to the woods which we've run about in as kids, and we'll just go to Bree. We'll just get to the prancing pony. It's not that big a deal. Yes, we haven't been there before, but it's close enough, and there are hobbits there and everything. So that, gone is that confidence. Fully is gone that confidence that they are somehow in a land, in a homely land. Now he's come to the realization that, my goodness, I'm really not home, and I'm not getting home anymore, or anytime soon. And this is truly dangerous. And it's interesting that just as he realizes it, he sees the Nazgul approach. Once he has this kind of he almost feels it in the atmosphere. He feels the danger, he feels the dread, and he immediately
Yeah.
sees the Nazgul.
Well, they're oftentimes felt before they are seen,
Yes.
which is off. Yeah, it's just a sign that they are indeed of creatures of malicious and antediluvian material. If you want to go there, but yes, it's it really happens rather quickly with this attack because they're on this old destroyed fortress, the bones of a watchtower, Weathertop, and they find out Gandalf had been there some days before. He had his ruins there. He was drawing in the old ancient runes, but they looked like there had been battle there. There was like signs of fire and scorched stone. But he's not there anymore, and that is when this attack happens after camping, after several more songs. And I mean, I could find a part of the attack which is good if you want me to recite it if we have time. So what happens is, over the lip of the little dell, on the side away from the hill, they felt, rather than saw, a shadow rise, one shadow or more than one. They strained their eyes, and the shadows seemed to grow. Soon there could be no doubt. 3 or 4 tall figures were standing there on the slope, looking down on them. So black were they seemed like black holes in the deep shade behind them. Frodo thought that he heard a faint hiss as a venomous breath, and felt a thin, piercing chill. There's that chill again. Then the shape slowly advanced. Terror overcame Pippin and Merry, and they threw themselves flat on the ground. Sam shrank to Frodo's side. Frodo was hardly less terrified than his companions. He was quaking as if he was bitter cold, but his terror was swallowed up in a sudden temptation to put on the ring. The desire to do this laid hold of him, and he could do nothing, he could think of nothing else. He did not forget the barrow nor the message of Gandalf, but something seemed to be compelling him to disregard all warnings, and he longed to yield. Not with the hope of escape or of doing anything, either good or bad, he simply felt he must take the ring and put it on his finger. He could not speak. He felt Sam looking at him as if he knew that his master was in some great trouble, but he could not turn towards him. He shut his eyes and struggled for a while, but resistance became unbearable, and at last he slowly drew out the chain and slipped the ring on the forefinger of his left hand. There's 2 paragraphs left. Are there any you'd like to cover there? I mean, there's an interesting one. Maybe I think you'll pick.
Yes. You mean before or afterwards in the end?
Oh, any of them there. I just thought, what Frodo cries, is quite interesting because it causes pain to the enemy.
Yeah, and once again we see that we see kind of the nature almost of the temptation to put on the ring. It's it just simply makes you do it. There's kind of not much to it, is there? He doesn't want to. What was it? You've just read it, didn't you? It was just a sudden urge to put it on.
Not
that's
for any
kind of
hope
what
of escape.
Yeah, indeed. Not for any hope of escape, just to put it on. It's that temptation. But I have marked the very last paragraph, which of the chapter, which follows what you've read. At that moment, Frodo threw himself forward on the ground, and he heard himself crying out loud, "O Elbereth, Gilthorniel, is that right? Gilthorniel?"
Yes, Gilthorniel, yes.
At the same time, he struck at the feet of his enemy. A shrill cry rang out in the night, and he felt a pain like a dart of poisoned ice once again. The ice pierced his left shoulder. Even as he swooned, he caught as through a swirling mist, a glimpse of Strider leaping out of the darkness, with a flaming brand of wood in either hand. With a last effort, Frodo, dropping his sword, slipped the ring from his finger and closed his right hand tight upon it, and that is the end of the chapter. That is what you mentioned, didn't you? That the crying out loud of the
Yes.
names. Um, and I thought it particularly interesting. It just I didn't think of it when I was reading it, but now rereading it, because we discussed the poem which Gandalf writes in his letter, right? And there is a line there
Yeah.
saying, a flame from the darkness shall spring, something like that. And it's interesting
Yeah.
seeing. Maybe it doesn't refer, specifically to this, but it's an interesting coincidence. A glimpse of Strider leaping out of the darkness with a flaming brand of wood in either hand. It's interesting, kind
Mm.
of flame jumping out of the shadow. It kind of
Yes.
matches quite well with what we've literally read like a chapter ago in the letter. But yeah, but
Because
that
Frodo,
yeah, go for it.
carry on. Sorry, no, Frodo. He was invisible, so
Yes.
this is why Aragorn failed to defend him. He couldn't see where he was. I always try to understand this. Where was Aragorn in all of this before? Because Frodo did make himself invisible, so Aragorn possibly he
Mm,
didn't know where he was, right? That makes sense.
yes.
Just wanted to make sure because in the movie he's gone getting something, and then he comes back just in time.
Do you think
But
he may have been gone here as well?
they make no mention. I think all that happens is he just disappears,
Mm,
and well, if I remember correctly, yeah, there's nothing about Aragorn mentioned where he's doing anything beforehand. I think it's only natural to say he didn't know where Frodo was.
yeah, it's quite interesting.
You know?
Yeah, I'm going to reread this and see. Because I haven't picked up on that. That's quite interesting. But it's interesting how Frodo he cried the names, right? So he
Yes,
almost
Elbereth. Yeah.
yes he almost kind of once again going back to the importance of names and songs and words. This is something almost reminds me of when Gandalf is defending against the Balrog, right? And
Yeah.
he uses these. He says something along the lines of, I'm the wielder of the flame of Anor. The dark file will not avail. Kind of these incantations. These,
Yeah.
almost a classic example of casting a spell, which is so widespread in fantasy, isn't there? And once again,
Yes.
there we see the importance of names, of words, even here.
Yes, it's not the first time that this name has come up. In fact, when the Nazgul is stalking them, the Nazgul flees at the mention of this name
Mm-hmm.
in a song the elves are singing, and this name will come up often. In fact, it'll be mentioned, and that's something to do with the background supernatural entities of this world that are really popping up behind the scenes once you really find out how to pick up on it. They're not there present, but their energy is, their servants are. Just like how there are servants of, darkness, there's the servants of good. And oftentimes in this world, I think two people like to focus on the servants of evil all the time. But we have to remember there are servants of good, and they're acting too. I think, doesn't Gandalf mention something like this where there are many forces in the in the world, Frodo.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them are evil, right?
Yes.
That's basically it. So yeah, I think it's a very scary because you do see the Nazgul in their real form.
Mm-hmm.
Paragraph second to last.
Yes.
They are gray hairs, long gray robes, haggard hands, helms of silver, white faces, keen and merciless eyes. So they're very ghoulish, scary, and that is what's concealed. And the movie did it just wonderful as well, wonderfully.
Yeah, indeed. We mentioned that when we were discussing the last chapter when discussing Nazgul, the portrayal of their kind of real kingly forms in the
Yes.
that Frodo sees are fantastic once again as with everything when it comes to costumes and design in the films. But next chapter, this is where we're right at the end of chapter 11, and chapter 12 is Flight to the Ford, and this is where kind of we see some of the role of um, an elf that you particularly like and that you miss from the films being kind of
Yeah.
hijacked in the films by Arwen, isn't there? As
Yes.
Frodo, just maybe it wasn't particularly clear, but Frodo was pierced with a poisonous blade. Yes, and he's lost his consciousness, and now they're going to kind of try to do their best to get Frodo some help. Right, he's not quite as useless as he was in the films. You know, in the films he's just really
Hmm.
like almost unconscious all the time, and he can't really walk. Here he can. Here he walks, but obviously he's in pain. His arm is just ice cold and grows
Yeah.
colder and colder. But he can still
He's
walk, and he can.
deteriorating.
Yeah, he's deteriorating for sure. But you know, Strider so doesn't quite need to carry him just yet. So
Mhm.
what we've got is, you know,
May I ask something real quick?
go for it.
May I take a 1 to 2 minute intermission? I need to get some water,
Oh yeah, of course. We'll
and
address the chat in the
yeah,
meantime. Excellent. Yeah,
all this
let's do that.
flapping of gums
Of course.
makes me parched. I'll be right back.
All right. Hello, chat. Let me just read through and sorry we didn't talk about the messages that you've sent us, but I think now is as good time as any. Let's see. Why each royalty in this Rings of Power TV series needs to have an over-the-top Roman clothes, yeah, and they're not even, I mean, good clothes. I mean, they just look great. They just look, well, exactly as you would expect, Amazonian plasticky, do they not? Um, let's see. That when we, I think this is Love the Pie says adds dramatic tension to the film format, and that's this is when we were talking about the role of Arwen and kind of that relationship as portrayed in the films, where she gives him that reassurance, and she ultimately, you know, pushes him to grab that mantle of king, figuratively speaking, you know, and become who you were meant to be. And I agree. I quite honestly, for as far as changes are concerned, and if they wanted to give Arwen more of a role in the films, I thought her role was exactly what it kind of should have been. You know, as a helper to Aragorn. Uh, Alex says movie Aragorn seems to favor accomplishing the task at hand, and his kingship takes a back burner. The books really do well at synthesizing how his kingship is compatible with the entirety of the quest. Yes, I agree, and this is something Modern Monarchist has mentioned, for example, how he doesn't, you know, he appears kingly from the outset. You know, he almost embraces that, but he's noble. He truly is noble. He doesn't just, you know, look down upon Boromir or anybody else. He just embraces what he's meant to be. And Love the Pie goes on to say, like King David when in exile. Indeed. Love the Pie also says Nazgul, esteemed diplomats of the Dark Land. Yeah. This is when I was talking about the representatives of Mordor. He also says Fatty Bulger is such a great name. Oh, I agree. The naming, I'm pretty sure you were there during, you know, at our last stream, but we really talked about the naming convention of Tolkien. How these are not just not random names. I mean, you know, Fatty Bulger, but also Farmer Maggot. You know, Mrs. Maggot. I mean, it just cracks me up, really. Let me just get myself some water. And then you talk about Pernisol pranced away. Yeah, ditching him Bill in the mountains. Yeah, I mean, Sam really doesn't want to do that, does he? When it comes to Moria, but it's for the best. And soon, of course, following the flight to the ford, we will come to many meetings. We'll come to ultimately Rivendell, right? This is kind of their, what shall I say, what the preliminary checkpoint, like the checkpoint in their adventures. You know, this is their first destination is Rivendell, and there will be we will be introduced to different characters, both those that we see in The Hobbit and other new characters. And it's interesting, the council that gathers there, it really doesn't gather at the request of Elrond, for example. It just kind of happens randomly. And once again, this is to go into the much talked about theme in the first part that we did, and that is providence. That is this kind of invisible hand of God, not to be confused with the cringe invisible hand of the market, but this invisible hand of God, the providence, something that pushes the heroes to go, even though they may not understand where they're, why they're going or where they're going. There is just this push to continue, the push to go, even though they may not know what lies ahead. And we'll see that in the Council of Elrond, that all of these representatives of the dwarves, the elves, the men, they kind of come there by chance. Once again, we'll meet that word, chance, yes, that we've talked about in the first part, and we're sure to make that connection when we come to it. So yeah, if you, whilst Modern Monarchist takes a sip of water or tea or coffee, whatever he's making, feel free to pop something into the chat, maybe a question that you've got, a comment, some feedback. I'll be sure to address it. You can also just say hi, and I'll say hi back if that's your thing. I think I really enjoy these streams as we do them. The one thing that I did receive was a request to put it in podcast form. We discussed this off air with Modern Monarchist, and I think the way I'll do it is I will make an audio only recording of it and put it into leave it in Telegram so that people can listen to it there. I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, good idea. Or yeah, I could try to find another place where podcasts can work. I'm frankly just not into the podcast scene or anything to do with it. So yeah, I have to become more accustomed with that, and I will. I think I will look into this for other things as well too. It's safer, I think, than on YouTube. So
I agree. It's definitely safer in Telegram than it is on YouTube for sure.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So yeah, are you ready? Have you been revitalized?
Yes. Sorry for my wait. I had a shortcut to mushrooms.
Yes.
No. Oh, that was terrible. That was terrible.
A shortcut.
Very, very bad. Yes.
A flight to the ford. So, what is going on? They're on their way to Rivendell with the hopes to cure Frodo, and ultimately, because that is their, as I said whilst you're away, that is kind of their checkpoint, isn't it? Kind of their first destination.
Yes, it is, and now they're very desperate to achieve this because Frodo he's hurt badly. He's kind of speaking in almost a semi-delirious way, and Sam doesn't know what to do about this. And as opposed to the movie where Sam tries to defend, Sam, by the way, he couldn't even raise his arm to defend Frodo, and Sam was pretty scared even of Strider, for instance. But Strider says, "I'm not a Black Rider, Sam, nor in league with them. I've been trying to discover something of their movements, but I found nothing. I cannot think of why they have gone and do not attack again. But there is no feeling of their presence anywhere at hand." So that's what leads into our story here. They're trying to keep a fire going. Everyone's kind of panicking because, he didn't, if it wasn't poisoned, if it wasn't a, blade of sinister witchcraft, it wouldn't have killed him because it didn't stab him particularly in a dangerous place. It wasn't a mortal wound.
Yes.
Just from the stab.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. And in the films, we clearly can can tell that this is a serious wound, can't we? I mean,
Yes.
he almost, Aragorn says this, but I think Gandalf will say it after Frodo awakens. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Aragorn says in the films that, this, he will soon pass into the Shadow Realm and become a wraith just like them. And
Yeah.
I don't think we learn it from Aragorn in this chapter in the book, but that is certainly canon from what I understand. That he's kind of becoming a wraith, just like just like the Nazgul. So it's
Yes,
definitely
it is
something
true.
serious. This is definitely something that needs to be addressed. Needs to be addressed now. And when they talk about Rivendell, the passage that I have marked is a bit further in, and it is let's see. Where did you learn such tales? If all the land is empty and forgetful, asked Peregrine. The birds and beasts do not tell the tales of that sort. The heirs of Elendil do not forget all things past, says Strider, and many more things than I can tell are remembered in Rivendell. Have you often been to Rivendell? Said Frodo. I have, said Strider. I dwelt there once, and still I return when I may. There my heart is, but it is not my fate to sit in peace, even in the fair house of Elrond. Two things that I've already mentioned that are kind of further evidenced here is
Yes.
there my heart is. So this is where the hobbits look back to the Shire and see, perhaps here we have some evidence that when it comes to Aragorn, he looks back at Rivendell, right? This is kind of his homely place. And once again, we mentioned this elf-like nature about him, this thoughtfulness, this wisdom, this ancient aspect of his. That certainly fits well with his heart being in Rivendell. And just following that, he says, but it is not my fate to sit in peace, even in the fair house of Elrond. So once again, he's fully aware of what he has to do. No hesitation, right? He says it. It's not my fate to sit in peace, even in the fair house of Elrond. So he knows he'll move on. He knows he will. He's already made the vow. In the books, he's made the vow. All I can do, whether in life or in death, I will do it. To serve you, Frodo. So he definitely knows what the perhaps doesn't know ultimately what the quest needs to be because they haven't decided yet on what they need to do with the ring, but he definitely knows that him returning as the king, reclaiming his rightful place and helping Frodo in his quest, that is definitely something that he has to do.
Yes, and he's resigned to the fact that his struggle is going to be against the dark enemy. Like that's the purpose of his life, against Sauron. That's it. That was his role. That's his state in life, and state in life is something that is highly important in general for all of us, and Tolkien generally has that for people in his world as well. Following their duties, following their state in life, the position they were born in or grew up in. There's no shirking, it's no shirking. It's an embrace of it no matter how painful it is, and you can honestly tell it's painful. Because he does have it. That's his home, and I think it's where his heart is too, because that's where Arwen is too, right?
Maybe that's what he also means by his heart is there. Perhaps that's kind of another meaning to it.
Because he's not, he's obviously not he hasn't even talked about it, but he has alluded to it already through the Tinuviel, through the Luthien poem, which was in the previous chapter. So he is thinking about it. I mean, I could imagine wandering the wilds for decades and maybe popping in every once in a while and then going back. It must be no wonder why he himself too seems to have a very kind of melancholic or again, a world-weary type of attitude. Should we talk about how Frodo seems to be recovering for a bit from the Athalias, from that plant? It has that healing property. I wish there was something like that, man. I tell you.
Yeah, of course, go for it. If you've got anything, if you've got a passage, yes.
Yeah. So again, talking about Tolkien's love for plants and herbs and the like. There's when Frodo's feeling very badly, just right after his wound, Strider applies leaves. He says, "I have walked far to find, for this plant does not grow in the bare hills. but in the thickets away south of the road. I found in the dark by the scent of its leaves. He crushed a leaf in his fingers, and it gave out a sweet and pungent fragrance. It is fortunate that I could find it, for it is a healing plant that the men of the West brought to Middle Earth. Athalias they named it, and it grows now sparsely, and only near places where they dwelt or camped of old. And it is not known in the north, except to some of those who wander in the wild. It has great virtues, but over such a wound as this, its healing powers may be small. Now, again, the hands of a king. Do you know where I'm leading into this?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know where the hands of a king as well? What we're gonna find now with these wounds, oftentimes that these great men and these great, elves, anyone that this like nobility, this bloodline, blood's very important in Tolkien's world. They have healing properties, and Aragorn has that as well as one of the rangers, Dunedain. And not only does he understand the natural attributes and properties of this Athalias plant, but it's made even stronger by he's the one that's doing it. Isn't that a biblical call? You know, like the hands of a king are healing. I'll be honest with you, I haven't read the Bible fully besides verses in over a year and a half, and so I'm struggling to picture that. But I know that there's always something about kings having holy hands, but maybe you can fill me in on this.
Well, I'm in a similar situation. It makes sense, doesn't it? And it makes sense that, of course, kings normally, well, they aren't just kind of secular authority. I mean, they are in a sense a secular authority, but where do they receive their power from? I mean, ultimately, you're the modern monarchist, right? So surely you would understand me alluding to the divine right of kings, and certainly in a sense, a position of a king is a religious one, and you can see that nobility, that bloodline, almost which can be consecrated, and in this case, it almost is that may provide with benefits such as having almost miraculous dimension to the man, such as being able to heal, or having a extra long life, as he does,
Mhm.
as men of his type do, the Dunedain, the descendants of the Númenóreans. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yes.
that's their. And these characters are truly like the noble archetype of every good quality you can have in a man. The Dunedain, the Númenóreans, for the most part, in the Lord of the Rings, and as this carries on, because there is a lot to this chapter that we have to cover. There is a lot of travel in this chapter over a lot of distances. I mean, Middle Earth is huge. It is huge. And the movies does that in some ways well, in some ways it doesn't, but it's gigantic. And at first Frodo's feeling okay from the effects of the plant, but he's slowly getting worse and worse. But what I like to mention and bring out from the book is that he still is laughing. Yes. Even though, like, they discover Bilbo's trolls. Remember in the Hobbit, if you haven't, these trolls that got turned to stone after arguing how to eat the dwarves.
Yes.
Well, there's a song about that, and they're laughing about it. And Frodo even laughs, even though he has a wound which is causing him to become weaker and weaker, and making the cold spread across his body. So I just like to mention Frodo is stronger than he looks, stronger than a diminutive hobbit.
And interestingly, after the song, and I believe Sam, it was Sam, wasn't it, who sings?
Yes, Tom the troll, right?
Yes, and afterwards, you mentioned Frodo's response, and I'd just like to read it out. Sam muttered something inaudible. "It's out of his own head, of course," said Frodo. "I'm learning a lot about Sam Gamgee on this journey. First he was a conspirator, now he's a jester. He'll end up by becoming a wizard or a warrior." "I hope not," said Sam. "I don't want to be neither."
That is good. That is good.
He will, in a sense, become a warrior, will he not? This is, once again, it may be one of those little foreshadowing.
A warrior gardener, yeah.
Yeah,
warrior gardener. In place of a king, you would have a gardener, right?
Yeah. I can't imagine Sam ever going into a little schizo rant like that.
No, he kind of did have in his head, but that's that's
True,
many episodes later down in the third book.
true, true. Anything else? Let's see. After the song, um, I've got the. Shall we talk about the appearance of in the films it was Arwen, but here it was a certain other elf, Glorfindel.
Yeah. Yes, we can discuss the change too if you want. But yeah, you can lead the way with Glorfindel. I won't be selfish.
Um, the light faded, and the leaves and the bushes rustled softly. Clearer and nearer now the bells jingled, and clippity-clip came the quick, trotting feet. Suddenly, into the view below came a white horse, gleaming in the shadows, uh, running swiftly. In the dusk, its headstall flickered and flashed, as if it were studded with gems like living stars. We see that connection, don't we, often between elves and stars. Um,
Hmm.
the rider's cloak streamed behind him, and his hood was thrown back. His golden hair flowed shimmering in the wind of his speed. To Frodo it appeared that a white light was shining through the form and raiment of the rider, as if though a thin veil. Well, what I thought about when Arwen appeared in the films, kind of a very similar scene, isn't it? Frodo is there, unconscious.
Yeah.
Suddenly, a light appears, and she appears out of that light in kind of this beautiful dress. But obviously, that only appears to him. It's like an illusion, right?
Yes.
She's wearing different clothing, and so I thought that kind of entrance was kind of accurate to the books. I thought I quite liked when Arwen appears herself, but it is Glorfindel that appears. So go for it. I kind of want to do a little introduction and read this passage, but um, kind of fill us in on Glorfindel.
Yes. Well, if bear with me here, my friends, because I do want to cover one more paragraph of reading about him.
Yes.
Strider sprang from hiding and dashed towards the road, leaping with a cry through the heather. But even before he had moved or called, the rider had reined in his horse and halted, looking up towards the thicket where they stood. When he saw Strider, he dismounted and ran to meet him, calling out, Eina vedui dunadan me govaninen. His speech and clear ringing voice left no doubt in their hearts. The rider was of the elven folk. No others that dwelt in the wide world had voices so fair to hear. But there seemed to be a note of haste or fear in his call, and they saw that he was now speaking quickly and urgently to Strider. So Strider is he's a Rivendell. Glorfindel is a Rivendell elf, and he is from a very very high kindred, a high family of elves, and he hears all about that, all what was happening. He's been informed on it, the coming of the Nazgul. He's heard that Gandalf has not returned, that there's a great mission, that there's something that needs to be achieved, some kind of item, and messengers have been sent out, and he was part of this. He was part of this. He was part of this group that was there to cast a wide net to search the lands. So that is why they searched the wilderness, because in order to escape, to get off the main road, they had to cross country it. And that is why Glorfindel found them. To some degree, it was kind of like a shot in the dark, but yet it wasn't, because that was really the best way to go, putting two and two together. But he's very overpowered. Wouldn't you describe him as that, my friend? Wouldn't you describe him as overpowered? Like he's just full of it. Like he just is explicitly powerful, at least.
Yeah, for
There's
sure.
no shadow. There's no veiling of it.
Yeah, for sure. And they spoke, didn't they? Or they will speak of sending him as a member of the party. And instead of the hobbits, they would want to send the hobbits back to defend the Shire, because Elrond thinks that it will be attacked. And it's interesting that he points out, because it's kind of a foreshadowing, isn't it, of the scourging of the Shire. So he was,
Yes.
in a sense, he was right, of course, that to think that the Shire was not invulnerable. We see this as this idyllic place, but we've already seen that it can be attacked. The Nazgul were there. The Nazgul, did bother Fatih Bolger, and when Saruman sends the savages, it's definitely that idyllic place is definitely not safe. It's definitely not safe. And so I think just him mentioning sending Glorfindel on a mission with them in the future just speaks to his abilities.
Yes, and he doesn't. He also he's looking at Frodo's wound and he basically says what Arwen says in the movie. The wounds of this weapon are beyond my skill to
Mm-hmm.
heal. But just him looking at it, just him just touching the arm, causes the pain to decrease just a bit, to withdraw. So yes, he's very powerful. He's very powerful, and it's good you have someone like this. And that's the elvish thing, right? There's not many of them. There's not many of them, but they're extremely powerful for the most part. All of them are, and it's always that way. You wish you could have more of these, but it's almost like the cream of the crop are the best in society, the best in culture. They're always, they're frankly, they're always getting involved in wars or in these things which sap their strength, sap their population. And so what you do have left are just a few of them. And that's history as well, especially when it comes to dynasties or good houses or strong people. I do like that correlation between the elves and sort of their steady decline in population and in like grandeur, but still having this superiority in almost every way. It just draws a lot of parallels to a lot of greatness that has faded in our own world.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're the real. I would not compete with you when it comes to history. So do say that, if something I'm about to say is inaccurate. But it seems to me that perhaps it's the elves, perhaps it's the Númenóreans. They also play a similar role to this. But maybe the Númenóreans more so. But they are kind of a civilization that's still alive, but it almost plays a role of that like past civilization. Perhaps the Númenóreans do make a better fit. And what I mean by that is, in Alan Lee, when they were making the films, he talked about this. He talked about the ruins, and Weathertop is one of those ruins, isn't it? That the Númenóreans made, and he talks
Yes.
about this, and he talks about there being like a base kind of almost architecture, a base culture that is withered away, that is underneath Middle Earth, that Middle Earth was kind of built upon almost, and it almost reminds me of something like the Parthenon, or reminds me of these Roman ruins. A culture that has given us so much, that has in many ways formed us, right? The Greek and
Yes.
Romans, the Greek Roman civilization that is no more, but we see
Yeah.
not just aspects of their learning, of their history, of their culture, reflected in our culture, but we also see the physical presence, the ruins. We see the imitation of their architectural styles. I always found that the Númenóreans, but also the elves, kind of play a similar role of that kind of fundamental or foundational civilization.
Yes, they're the old bones. They're like the fertilizer.
Yes.
Well, literally, in some cases, when you go to certain locations of Middle Earth, they're the fertilizer. But you gotta remember, it's just you gotta love it. The Greco-Roman, you forgot a very big component of the Greco-Roman. It's Orco-Gondorian, okay? Orco-Gondorian. And if you organize it any other way, you're being very hurtful. You're being very hurtful.
Oh no,
So,
I'm so sorry about
yes.
that.
I just had to fill that in. Yeah. Oh, no, don't call it that. No, no, it's Orco-Gondorian, okay?
Oh, of course. Um,
Okay. Well, that aside, that aside, I had to.
let's see another development that kind of let's go to Frodo's character. Remember, I forgot to point out last chapter, or maybe it's also this chapter. But in any case, Frodo spoke about, and we mentioned this last time, about this quest, that he feels as his own quest. Yes, he feels like he's ultimately the hero in the story. He needs to make that sacrifice, and I
Hmm.
think we see how mindful he is truly uh, of that and of his friends. Consequently, right? And here he says, I shall not ride him. That's referring to the horse, I believe, that Glorfindel points out. He says, ride him to Rivendell. He says, I shall not ride him. If I am to be carried off to Rivendell or anyone else, leaving my friends behind in danger. He refuses. He does not want to, people to sacrifice him, or hobbits and Aragorn just does not want to put them in any more danger, or in a sense, kind of leave them behind.
yeah, he's kind of he sacrifices so much of himself for others. Maybe you've made you know Christ-like comparisons, and I mean this with respect. I mean, didn't you kind of say that there's certain
Yes.
characters that have this sort of redeemer quality,
Mm-hmm.
this symbolism at least? It leaks through the writing a
Yeah.
bit.
And Frodo, to
And
the
I- and
point,
it,
it's quite interesting. Very quickly mention what Glorfindel, or how he responds. He says, well, Glorfindel smiled. I doubt very much, he said, if your friends would be in danger if you were not with them. So the wisdom
yeah.
shining through. The pursuit would follow you and leave us in peace, I think. It is you, Frodo, and that which you bear that brings us all in peril.
Right on the head there. I
Yeah.
hit it right on the head. It's true, right? Frodo's not looking at the big picture, and it's like, yeah, you're the one. You're the one. You're the whole reason why we got some, ancient demons coming after us. It's your fault.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's but he's not vindictive about it. He's not vindictive. There's this. He does give a certain liquid to drink to to Frodo, and
yes,
this
he
is
does.
like, what I'm talking about, right? It's elvish, like elvish water, basically. It says it's as clear as spring water, has no taste, did not feel either cool or warm in the mouth, but strength and vigor seemed to flow into all their limbs as they drank it. Eaten after that, draught the stale bread and dried fruit, which was now all that they had left, seemed to satisfy their hunger better than many a good breakfast in the Shire had done.
Mm.
Yes, after hard work, oftentimes, you'll find food to be the greatest when it's just right then. It could be anything, but when you have it then.
Is this the same liquid, the same flask which they will be given when they go off after Rivendell? Because I remember, what was it? I think it was Gandalf. Gandalf kind of passing around, like, a potion of sorts, some liquid that keep revitalizing them.
It's the same one, Miravir.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end of the chapter, and this is when Frodo, unlike in the films, right? In the films he rides together with Arwen, does he not? She decides to kind of escort him on the same horse. They take the same horse to Rivendell, and then the Nazgul follow Arwen and Frodo, and she ultimately, in the end, is the one to summon the forces of the river to kind of wash away all the darkness of the Nazgul. And here, I believe Frodo is riding alone, is he not? Kind of Glorfindel, puts him on the horse and kind of sends him off.
Yep. I mean, Glorfindel is with him though, right?
Yes.
He's close by.
Yes, I think they're riding along with him, but I think he's riding the horse alone. I think ultimately what ends up happening is that Glorfindel, Aragorn, they kind of distract some of the Black Riders, right, from coming after Frodo. And as we'll find out later, I think so does Gandalf. I don't think not all the Black Riders are there in the first place. But I think that's what happens anyway. I think or it either was he distracted them. They were distracted by Gandalf either during their time when they attacked Weathertop, or here. I can't quite believe. Do you recall? Were there 9 of them at Weathertop?
There were not 9.
There
were not 9.
I think at that point they were distracted.
Remember, there's Nazgul at Crick breaking down the door.
Yes.
I believe. So they're all separated, but I think you had only a few of them. A few of them here, maybe 4 or 5. And I believe the Witch King, their chief master, was amongst them.
Yeah. So he gets to the ford, which is on the way to Rivendell. Turns around, and the similar way in which the power of the river is summoned in the films. It's not Arwen who does it. We'll find in the end that kind of Frodo doesn't understand what's going on. Obviously, he didn't summon it, but in the end of the day, we know that Elrond was the one who commanded the river because it will later be described as a part of his domain, a domain under his power, and so of course he in his elvish kind of magic, if you will, or this connection with nature, he's able to command it, and so that's ultimately what happens. Would you like to point something out from the sequence?
Yes, I can, and right before I do read, I'd like to mention, it's like rather than more of like a potion or any sort of discernible liquid or color in the sky or coming out of the mouth of someone who's uttering the spell. It's very much like a natural, like a spiritual connection
Yeah.
with the land, with even like a land deities. It's this wonderful
It's not like a
wonderful
hocus
connection.
pocus Harry Potter thing, it's like a
Yeah, I'm casting shade at Harry Potter
yeah,
yet
yeah.
again for calling itself somewhat even in the connection of this, at least
Yeah.
in genre. But anyway, I want to read what the Nazgul are like because
Hmm.
at this point they're desperate. They're very desperate, and you can tell they're starting to shout more. And Frodo, I'm going to read from him. He sits upright in his
Yes.
horse with a sword, very hurt. He's hurt and he's weak, and he cries, go back to the land of Mordor and follow me no more." His voice sounded thin and shrill in his own ears. The riders halted, but Frodo had not the power of Bombadil. His enemies laughed at him with a harsh and chilling laughter. Come back, they called. To Mordor we will take you. Go back, he whispered. The ring, they cried with deadly voices, and immediately their leader urged his horse forward into the water, followed closely by two others. So they've broken fast now. Their furtiveness. They are now out in the open. All of this. By Elbereth and Luthien the Fair, said Frodo with a last effort, lifting up his sword, you shall have neither the ring nor me. Then the leader, who was now halfway across the ford, stood up menacing in his stirrups and raised up his hand. Frodo was stricken dumb. He felt his tongue cleave to his mouth and his heart laboring. His sword broke and fell out of his shaking hand. So, simply with a thought, or even the motion of his hand, putting the will to the movement of form, this leader of these nine broke his sword. And mind you, this is the sword that he had from the barrow, which was an enchanted, Numenorian, nice
Like
sword.
dagger,
It's
yeah.
broken. Yeah, it's gone. The elf horse reared and snorted. The foremost of the black horses had almost set foot upon the shore. At that moment, there came a roaring and a rushing, a noise of loud waters rolling many stones. Dimly, Frodo saw the river below him rise, and down along its course there came a plumed cavalry of waves. White flames seemed to Frodo to flicker on their crests, and he half fancied that he saw amid the water white riders upon white horses with frothing manes. The three riders that were still in the midst of the ford were overwhelmed. They disappeared, buried suddenly underneath the angry foam. Those that were behind drew back in dismay. So, yes, that is a beautiful scene, reconstructed wonderfully in the movies as well. I almost wish they would have had Frodo had this moment of strength, though, rather than have it be anyone else.
I mean, the thing is, what I've interesting you mentioned that this kind of clear juxtaposition between the film Frodo and the book Frodo can clearly be seen in this sequence. By the time they're at the ford, Arwen is with him, of course, and he is as good as dead almost. Frodo is, in the films, but here he shows amazing courage, isn't it? I mean, it reminds me of that that line of the courage can be found even in the most unexpected of places, even the fattest hobbits. And I think that courage of the hobbits is really showcased here. I mean, the way he cries at them, go back to the land of Mordor and follow me no more. By Elbereth and Luthien the Fair, you shall neither have the ring nor me. It's extreme. It's extremely courageous of him, it seems to me, and obviously in stark contrast to just this kind of like almost passed out, half dead Frodo, isn't it?
Yes.
A Frodo that turns around and actually confronts the Witch King, confronts the leader of Angmar. It's really something.
Yeah, and it makes me think, like, even if Glorfindel or Arwen weren't even in that scene, if Frodo had just ridden off by himself to distract, that would have been, I believe, more compelling. And that may be a hot take, but I think it would have been compelling if he had. It's just they kind of do him slightly. They kind of undersell Frodo a bit in the trilogy when it comes to his bravery.
Yeah,
The rest of him, I believe, they get well, but he is very brave. I mean, Samwise is the brave, but Frodo is just, he's almost fearless.
yeah,
He's just, it's natural to him to just be this way.
yeah. I think in the films they really gave that aspect to Sam, wasn't it? I mean, that was what he really was showcasing. I mean, he was like an incarnation of bravery in a sense. So I think that's why they
Mhm.
in the films they wanted him to portray that, you know. So perhaps they wanted to make Frodo more seem more vulnerable at certain places, just to kind of show or showcase the value of Sam and other characters also, which it kind of speaks to um, something that I've read. What's that? Oh my god, I forgot the name of that critic again. We spoke of last time. Tom Sheeple, maybe.
Sh- sh- no, I got it. I got it.
Shipley,
I'll look it up in a Shippy. Shippy.
Shippy. Yeah, he did a little. I think in one of his books he talked about the trilogy, and he said it was a democratization of Tolkien. And it's a very interesting way to put it. And perhaps that goes into something we've discussed already and something we're discussing right now, which is the delegation of certain kind of extreme or very important tasks to minor characters as to whilst taking away from the key characters. So
Mhm.
example isn't just what you've just mentioned, which is Frodo and his bravery, kind of being delegated to Sam, you may say, but it also goes to the whole Arwen Aragorn thing, doesn't it? I mean, they delegated to Arwen the preparation of Aragorn to become king. They kind of they almost they made him more cowardly, or perhaps not more cowardly, more hesitant than he ought to have been, just for the sake of, once again, that, as he puts it, democratization. I think that's what we're talking about here.
Mhm. Yeah, and you can even see more and more too. It's like, yeah, there was a feminist angle as well, trying
Mm,
to add as many female parts as possible. And it's like there already weren't that many in the book. I mean, and so they did really stretch it out to a character that's mentioned 25 times, I believe, maximum, and that's
yes.
with the appendices as well.
2 times in the
So
Fellowship that I've counted in my recent reading.
yes,
Uh,
so that's just want to mention that, like, and they throw other characters kind of sadly under the bus. But when making a movie, and I've discussed this too on my show, when you're making a movie, like for instance, a great war flick, a great war film, A Bridge Too Far, you kind of have to. It's kind of like a bridged too far, if you know what I mean. They gotta cut a lot of stuff, and everyone that knows what happened and knows all the details and loves it, they're gonna be always critical of the abridgment because they wanted more. They didn't show enough. They left out some things. They had to combine multiple people into one person to save time. But we have to understand too, it's you can't have a 7 hour long movie, especially when getting New Line Cinema to make all the movies before they released. That was such a difficult task. So it's really just a miracle that it turned out the way it did at all.
yeah,
Like it's
I
just
agree. It was. I
our
think New Line
criticisms
was
have to
their
be.
Inline was their last kind of try, wasn't it? I mean, if it wasn't for New Line, they've already went to everyone else pretty much. And if it wasn't for them,
Mhm.
then that'd be it. We wouldn't see the trilogy. But I definitely agree with you there. I think it's always difficult. I mean, this is I won't dwell on this too much because it's straightforward, but it always is difficult to go from medium to medium. To try to portray what is written, because you can get away with a lot in a book that you can't get away with in a film. That's just simply how this media works. The films and the books. Uh, that's not to, of course, excuse any of this kind of feminist angle thing, which we're all aware of the problems that people face in the filming industry, and these problems are growing ever so often, when it comes to having to represent certain people in certain roles and give them certain amount of dialogue, etc., etc. Now it's as clear as daylight with, well, I mean, with the Rings of Power. You can see that very clearly. But you can clearly see that at that time, at the time when Peter Jackson was directing this, it wasn't quite so bad. It was not quite so bad as it is now. Although, we can see the outlines of what is to come 20 years later, in this kind of multi-culti world.
Hey, but they're putting $715 million into the first season. Come on. I mean,
I remember seeing the headline, the first $1 billion TV show, right? That's the headline?
Yeah. Yes. Welcome. Have you, well, I don't want to abridge them. We could talk about what we've read overall. I did say I think that I could go till 2, but I do want to finish, and we could talk about what we've already read or what the movies cover up to this point, because I do want to leave book 2 and start it on a full episode or a full show, if that sounds good.
I had the same thought. So
yes, because it really is a whole different animal.
It is.
It's even written differently to some degree. It's probably due to the passing of time in which Tolkien wrote these books. I believe that he, I don't want to just put words in his mouth. His letters explain everything, of course. I've read them once. But he definitely introduces new characters that aren't hobbits. And it's a known fact that the plot speeds up immensely as well.
Yes, it does. I mean, look at what happened. This has been, for me, once again, I also have this kind of more of a pockety version of The Lord of the Rings. It's been 300 pages almost in the first book. Once again, I have a very small book. And I mean, have they moved on really, that much? Has that much really happened? What has happened? And in fact, in the many meetings, he kind of sums this up, doesn't he? He says, the disastrous shortcut through the old forest, the accident of the prancing pony, and his madness in the putting on of the ring in the dell under Weathertop. I mean, geographically speaking, maybe not geographically when we look at the map, but it certainly feels like the last 300 pages, that first book, was a bit more kind of down to earth, very hobbity in a sense. You know what I mean? Very hobbity. Yes. It's still kind of a localized adventure. That's what it feels like.
Yes, and it's something I wish, it was imitated more. A lot of times with these similar stories, there's always this immense rush right to the beginning of the quest, or the you don't really spend time. They don't take time to to really ingratiate yourself with everyone. It just turns into a big old hack and slash romp. But with this, it's very much the personalities, now the whole group. It's how could you not? And in many stories, like in the Hobbit films, for instance, there's most of the dwarves, you don't even know who the heck they are if you've never read the book. They just are funny, quirky, dumpy little dudes, and that's about it. And I know Tolkien kind of wrote the Hobbit as a children's book, and the dwarves aren't really that characterized, but they still are treated with a respect in that book, whereas in the movie, it sounds just like an average, I don't know, like I'm watching a campy 1980s fantasy movie. That's what it feels like. I don't know. I'm bitter towards them, my friend.
Yeah. So, and in the second book, now the quest kind of levels up. From a party of a bunch of hobbits and this Strider who's saying that he's king, and this elf that appears out of nowhere. We really level up, don't we? We get a whole cast. Now we see that where in the past we have the small group escaping from the Nine, the Nazgul, the Dark Lord. They are now kind of formed a counterpart group right? Almost kind of
Mhm.
an equivalent group to them. And it seems like to me that was, that instills in them and in the reader more confidence, right? Because now we have, the nine juxtaposed with the nine, right? The Guardians versus the Nazgul. It seems to me that the quest has once again leveled up, and now, now we'll go into the dark mines of Moria, and we'll face, we'll face the darkness that lays there in shadow and flame. And there's Caradhras, who's just by the weather is trying to kind of destroy you.
Yeah.
It really does level up, and now the orcs are explicitly, after you. There's been a treachery. Really, a lot happens on a global level, which really differentiates it from the local little adventure we've so far been on. It seems.
Yeah, it makes it seem so small. It's definitely the home front to this war, and it's still rough. It's still very rough, and it seems like the whole weight of the world is upon them. But as we'll find at the Council of Elrond, everyone has a set of problems.
Mm.
Every single group of people, nation, they're going through it, and that chapter is very long. I think it's like almost worthy of a whole show itself because it's so long and it's so good and it's packed of. Well, you're introduced to a lot of characters there, but before we dive into that, of these last few chapters, I'd just like to ask you, what are your favorite of book one? Your top three chapters to make it easier.
This is interesting. Well, are you decided on those? Because whilst you talk about them, maybe I'll decide. I've never really thought about it that way. But
All
if
right.
you've
Well, I'm just
decided, you can go through them.
yes, and I'll just talk briefly about
Mm-hmm.
of really why I like them. So, my top three, I'd have to say that Shadow of the Past is number three. Then number two, I'd have to say, is probably Fog on the Barrow Downs. I talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Largely because I like to be thrilled, and that is chiefly what is achieved there. And then it's just never talked about really ever again. And then number one is A Knife in the Dark because it is. There's a lot of songs in it, but good songs. They're more serious, and of course, Strider's really growing into his own here. And I can't get enough of Aragorn really in the books. Everything to do with him in the second book, and I mean like the Two Towers it's just amazing to me. I just wish that you could have almost, if Tolkien wrote more, a real story like Children of Hurin style about him and his early adventures, like the hunt for Gollum, his time, and well, I'm not going to spoil it all. It's for you guys to find out, but you know what I mean.
Yes. Um.
It's just
Yeah.
it's good.
For me, I think one of my favorite chapters must be also Fog on the Barrow Downs. I do agree with you that kind of the misty, kind of skeleton-y, tombish like atmosphere is really
Mhm.
something that I enjoyed. It really did it really is unsettling, isn't it? And of course,
Macabre, yeah.
yeah, and it really, it has that. One of my favorite lines in the whole book is that it has that far green country under a swift sunrise. So I mean, just
Yeah.
based on that, it must be one of the top chapters for me. Um, for me, the first book, in a sense, um, I think I have to go with the favorite chapter being, I don't know if we can count the prologue, really, probably not, but I really like A Long Expected Party. I really like the time that we spend kind of in Hobbiton, in Bag End, when things are jolly and good, and nothing dark has happened to us yet, and they're partying.
Mm.
There's I don't know. There's really something, the homely nature of Bag End. There's really something about the introduction of the hobbits, that
Yeah.
that is forever imprinted in my mind.
Yeah, that was a close. That one barely got edged out. It's so nicely done. But it would just be I could almost use a full book about the rural nature, the daily happenings of the Four Farthings. I could just imagine
It is something, and
without strife.
I do really enjoy also the letter that we read through today in Strider in that chapter. You know, the Gandalf's letter to Frodo. I think upon rereading the book, this is kind of one of the highlights. Weirdly enough, for me, it's um, something that is a bit of a bit comic, isn't it? But uh, also has this classic kind of fantasy, you know, questing feel about it. You know that the wizard is leaving you a note, talking about a king of old, and there is that iconic poem about Strider, and of course his introduction as the king is so important. Is so important in the whole trilogy. So Strider is, and that kind of letter in particular, I quite enjoy as well. And of course,
Yes.
what we've just read, the facing off when Frodo faces off the Nazgul, the Black Riders. I thought when we just read through it, that the end of that chapter, I thought it was quite powerful, wasn't it? I mean, it really does. It really does show you a counterpart, another nature to Frodo. Uh, a nature counter to that melancholy type. We see the extent of his bravery, and also see kind of how learned and entrenched in lore he also is. Right, he always uses those names of the ancient past at which these creatures revolt. He
Mhm.
knows he kind of summons. It's funny, we talked about him being led on a quest, and everyone being led on a quest, oftentimes by chance
Swept
and,
off their
and
feet,
swept
right?
off their feet by providence. And it seems to me that he's I don't know, he's almost aware of it. He's almost aware that almost the entire history is kind of behind him on this, kind of the entire world is behind him on this, and he kind of just, says, by the name of this and by the name of that, be gone. It's almost like saying, but in the name of Christ. It kind of harkens back to this. When I hear him cry those names out, it really reminded me of in the New Testament we read about how the apostles, they cured just in the name of Christ, right? The name of Christ and the faith in Christ cured people. And so that kind of Christian notion of the names and of the words of something that is holy, that is otherworldly, that is divine, kind of shines through at the end with Frodo, and his bravery is really something to behold, I think. So that flight to the Ford, I also quite enjoyed.
Yes, it shows another dimension to Frodo yet again. I think for the second time, but even more so with the names, because he combines his knowledge with his bravery, right? It kind of
Mm.
that's why he's so not relatable, but that's why he gets along with the more ancient races. He gets along with the nobles like Strider, and then in the future Faramir. He gets along with Faramir quite well, is because they do share very similar, attributes. Frodo isn't a warrior, but he wants to protect the Shire. He needs to protect himself, and that is how I see a lot of. Well, that's how it should be. When you want to defend something, it shouldn't be like bloodlust or even like just for the sake of fighting. It should be to protect, to safeguard, to maintain. And Frodo has that. He employs that. Mm,
Yeah, something that
yeah.
isn't shown in the books, but that just once again plucks at my heart, is Frodo selling Bag End. I mean, that is just, I almost can't handle it. And I was like, how? You talk about the homely nature, you talk about Bag End, you talk about the Shire, and you kind of harken back to it in your memories for power. And then you sell it. You sell Bag End to the Sackvilles, right? To the Sackville Bagginses.
Yes. Your
What do you
hateful
think? What
relative.
do you think that's all about? I mean, it seems to me that is that perhaps can be interpreted as a way for he already feels like, and he knows already from the beginning. Maybe he feels like the quest is going to be something that is far more important than that little hobbit hole. Well, it's not very little; it's prime real estate, but a hobbit hole
Yeah.
nonetheless in the Shire, and perhaps even unknowingly so. Um, that kind of foreshadows that he will not really return to the Shire and will not be able, in the strict sense, he will be able to, but in the same feel about it the same way, walk around it the same way, he just won't be able to in the end. Maybe it harkens to that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, he knows. I think he knows already he'll never come back, and
Yeah.
he gives it away because what damage can it do? It's kind of like a good deed.
Hmm.
It's just a good deed, It's maybe no other explanation than that. I don't think he's doing it for any other reason. He's not trying to like spit on Bilbo's name or anything like that. Of course
Yeah, of
not. But
course not.
he's definitely doing it for a good deed. He's like, what damage can it do? They're old anyway, and I'm leaving. I have no relatives here. It's just a complete. I'm never coming back. This is like, and I think it cements the fact in his mind that he's never coming back, because if he knows that they're living in his house, why would he ever want to return? It's kind of just
Hmm.
like this. I've closed that door in my life, and now here I am throwing the key into the river.
Perhaps, maybe what you're hinting at is that, um, yeah, he just doesn't want. He maybe he foresees that there is going to be temptation. There's going to be temptation to just turn back, right? And if
Yeah,
Bag End is just not there, then you know
yeah,
how's he going to turn back? It's interesting. Yeah, I think definitely that's definitely what it is. And also is just that, um, that quest, him realizing that this is going to be much bigger than Bag End, and selling it for kind of strategic reasons to once again to go to get to Quick Hollow, right? To try to not upset the order in the Shire too much. Uh,
yeah,
to see, oh, where's Frodo gone? Uh, and once again, he's just, you can just say, oh, he moved to Quick Hollow, right? He's got his new house there, etc., etc. So in that way, he's protecting the integrity of the quest as well, right? Because now suddenly there is an excuse for why he's left. Oh, he's just moved up, to Quick Hollow. Um,
yes,
but if he was just gone, right, and Bag End was just empty, then definitely more suspicions would arise, in the Shire. And as we know, kind of what do you call them? Rumors. They flow very quickly. They fly quickly in the Shire.
oh yeah,
They always talk about, and they always talk about strange folk and in the pubs, and they'll say, oh, this weird Frodo guy. He's just left, just like after Bilbo. What's happening there? I wonder.
yeah. Oh yeah, the only thing that what do they say? News is as odd as Brie. What did they say about that? News is odd as Brie. That's a comment that's said in the Shire, but
Yeah.
news does travel fast in the Shire, and the only people, the only group that has news traveling faster than the Shire are traditional Catholic Facebook chats. If you know anything, now a lot of you guys, some people are watching on replay. If they're not traditional Catholic, they won't know this, but it's like the Shire. It's like the Shire online. Nothing happens, at least in my group of parishes, without I find out about what I do from them before my family does. It's just like gossip and rumors, gossip and rumors.
Yeah,
But that's the Shire. That's the hobbits, man.
yeah. That's what we want to imitate, don't we? That's really
Yes.
be more like the old
Well,
Hobbit.
I don't want to give out gifts for my birthday. What?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, and I'm not saying it just as just to say it, but
LARP? No.
yeah, just to LARP. But as I've grown older, it definitely felt worse receiving gifts, and definitely
Yes.
became better granting gifts.
I think that's a good idea, right? And plus we can clean out our rooms.
Yeah,
You're like, oh, I got this old what do I got in here? I got a couple fans I need to give away. Bookcase, some globes, some stuffed birds, just like some random things. Ah, it's kind of nice actually. Maybe we should do this. We can reinstate Hobbit rule, you know. Shire reckoning. You're in my neighbor now. It's Shire reckoning now.
yeah.
Yeah, forget the Ides of March, right? This is
Yeah. Well, speaking of what's on your shelf, I was gonna ask you, what what's your like? Do you have you must have multiple editions of the trilogies, or do you just have the three books of the Lord of the Rings in particular. What is like? Do you have like a prized edition, or
I
do you have
do,
like a
yes.
rare edition? Yeah, tell us
I
about
have a
it.
rare edition. I have a rare edition from the 70s or
Mm.
60s. And I think it's from the 60s. It's got some weird art on it. Like the art is really, you could tell it's old in the 60s and 70s. It kind of has like this look. I have a Hobbit version. It's all in bookcases. Maybe I can send you pictures sometime. But it's all in kind of like in a bookcase in a closet. So I never touch it. But it's old. You know, in the third book, for instance, like Aragorn's riding through like a field of dead orcs. It's just like a weird. It's just like a weird book cover. And then the Hobbit I have is like a really creepy like Gollum ghoul looking at like this really plump, even more plump Bilbo, but it's again like a 60s, 70s art, and it's just like really weird. That's probably my most prized edition of that.
I have seen. Have you seen some of this first editions that go on auctions for like tens of thousands of dollars or something like that?
Oh,
That is
I wish
something.
I had them. I wish I had them, but I don't have anything. I know you were fishing. You were fishing. You're gonna rob my place, and then you're gonna take it. And then I see you next time I'm talking to you. You got like a studio, and you got.
I mean, yeah.
I
It's
wish.
I, look. It's there is something about old books, isn't there? Like recently, I picked up like a late 19th century German book that I really struggled to kind of find online what it is. But I bought it in a like a flea market a
Yeah.
year and a half ago. It's like a German book on art. It's an old multiple volumes, huge volumes German books on art, and there is something about old books, isn't there? There's when you
Yes. Kind of musty in a bit.
yeah, yeah, and it's definitely a dream. Definitely a dream. This is where I would spend $10,000 on. This is I'll definitely spend it on like an old edition of the Lord of the Rings. Just shows you how
Oh,
hopeless I
yeah.
am, really.
One day, like right now I got a good book. It's called Milk, Cheese, and Butter. And Milk, Cheese, and Butter is just a book about how to make milk, cheese, and butter. It's from the 1890s, and I treat it like gold. So it's an old book. I got a book from the early 1800s too. I gotta maybe share these with you.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, my
They're religious books, tomes.
nice, very good. It's speaking of religious books, this is something that we've lost, and that book which I talked about on art, it kind of preserves that the font, the print in the book is kind of old style. It harkens back to the medieval font, the medieval way to the letters were
Yeah.
the books were written in Latin, um, and this is something that does disappoint me a bit. Uh, is and especially it's so widespread now with the digital medium, how people just are
Uh,
going to forget how to write eventually, right? And kind of lose that aesthetic of the shorthand. They'll lose the aesthetic of the cursive writing.
oh
Uh,
yeah.
it's been a problem, obviously for a while as we have books that just use this kind of default print for a long time, for the last century or so, maybe even more. But especially when it comes to people, right? Just soon the children who are born now. I mean, will they even learn how to write by hand? And even if so, will they learn cursive? Will they learn, proper ways to
No.
write?
No one knows cursive. Are you kidding me? Like no one my age knows. In fact, most people older than me don't know. It's just a lost art,
Oh,
man. It's called
interesting.
calligraphy.
Yes.
Yeah. It's just like, oh, it's this old art that some nerds do. It's like, no, it's easier and it's faster to write in cursive and it looks prettier.
What's the status of it in America? You just said that a lot of the older generation have even lost it. Maybe it's just my particular upbringing. In Russian schools,
Oh,
which I have
yeah.
which I have visited. Basically, in primary schools, that's how the books that teach you how to spell out letters, how to actually write letters. They're all in
Yeah.
cursive, and basically in our primary school we were forced to write with a fountain pen and in cursive. There is nothing, no ballpoint nonsense, absolutely
Yeah.
nothing. But you're saying in America it's kind of even the older generations don't write in cursive.
Well, it's like you got to be born in the 50s really, and then even
Hmm.
then you got to be like a somewhat of a decent person who cares about it. If you're not, you're just gonna write, like with scripts and scraps. But yeah, I learned it in a private school. I was homeschooled for a long time too, so like my mom taught me. My parents know, all my
Hmm.
siblings know, most people around us know. But I think it'll fall off in about another maybe like 30 years. It'll decrease in America by like 20 to no, probably like another 30 years. I could say it could decrease by like 50 to 60%.
Hmm.
Cursive, just like go down to just a few more now. 'Cause there's still a decent amount of old people.
Yeah.
And
Well, especially as we get, generations who've basically grown up with smartphones. This is when that generation becomes, the equivalent of, I don't know, the boomers definitely, but even the millennials. That's when we'll see, the that's when we'll see cursive just going almost extinct. This is the point at which primary schools will be full of tablets and computers more so than little books and pens and so on and so forth. But
there's even schools. I mean, well, look on the bright side, right? In order to be a great man back in the old days, you had to be a truly fabulous man. But in order to be a great man now, you just got to be above mediocre. So you and me could be ruling over the masses as
is this
the
your copium? This is
no,
sure.
this isn't even copium, my friend. This is just legitimate reality.
Yeah,
If uh
it's true.
if education decays, if all this decays, we'll be like the feudal barons, and they'll be like, bringing us whatever goods they can, and we'll be the men of letters. The men of letters, and we'll be teaching this stuff. We'll be the wise ones.
Well,
If we
one
all
can
don't get like
certainly hope.
killed.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's where I was going. I think
True.
books and pens, obviously they help to prepare the mind, and they help to stay sane and to stay human. Even I would argue, but you know, guns will also be required in the future. I would think. Um,
Yes, of course, but it's about having the ethics behind the guns and an organization. Like if you believe in central authority, if you believe that there's a hierarchy to all things, you will probably be more successful with five guys and believing in those tenets than a group of individualistic libertarians who are numbering 20.
true.
It's just like I would take those guys who have central authority because they'll work together. They got a plan. The other guys are going to be just disparate. They're going to be fractious or factitious. How do you say that? I think it's fractious. And that's what you're going to get. So I think it's all about the training of the mind and then implementing it in stressful circumstances. But this is, this we're talking now about the apocalypse. We're talking about the apocalypse. What a way to end the Fellowship of the Ring stream, right?
I know. Yeah, yeah. The shadow will come. I think
The shadow of the
it is
past. Yeah.
looming. It is looming over us. So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to desperately connect it to what we've been doing, but I'm sure the
Yes.
viewers.
Well, just like the world is in peril now, so the fate of Middle Earth is in peril. The fate of the
Indeed.
Middle Earth is in peril, and we'll have to pick up with the council of Elrond to sort of get people up to pace. It's like it's the red pill moment. Get get red pilled, hobbits. Get red pilled, you guys. Come on,
Gandalf,
got to
the
get caught up with
ultimate,
that.
the red pillar. It's like Gandalf.
Yeah,
Gandalf with his. He should get a cozy channel.
Gandalf should. Yeah, Gandalf should. He would name. He would name.
He
He
would
would save
name
things.
them.
Yeah, Gandalf would name them. Elrond would be like Jared Taylor. Hello, welcome to the Council of Elrond. That's what he would do.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going into
Well,
hyperbole
you
here,
see,
but yeah,
elf kind. You see, if
yeah,
Mordor,
elf kind. Yeah, it's about elf kind. I
it's,
feel like E. Michael Jones is Gandalf because he's intense.
right. It's like, well, if the orc kind can have Mordor, surely the elf kind can have Rivendell, right? The
Yes.
freedom of
Yeah.
association.
Yeah. Jordan Peterson, Saruman. Okay. You see, if you have a coat of many colors, I am Saruman of many colors. And it's about individuality. No, I'm okay. I'm really strict.
Jordan Peterson has really, I mean, he's really shown his true colors. I mean, really, you hit it right on the nail. I think recently he's shown his true colors. I think at the
Yes.
beginning, I remember back in the day of 2016, you know, back in the libertarian days, we would say that he says some good things. He talks about he even named them or used to name them sometimes. He would talk about Solzhenitsyn, and that's not too far away from a certain book that is banned everywhere in the West. And it's
Yes.
interesting. I've seen a video, someone approaching him, like Groiper style for a Q&A, and just going like, "Why don't you ever talk about Solzhenitsyn's 200 years together?" It's like, what do you think
Mm.
about his ideas? And Peterson
Yeah.
basically, you know, uh, let's just say, craps his pants for lack of a better. He does really look like it. I mean, he looks like totally out of bounds, and he just shuts him down. Basically, well, I really don't think we should talk about this, blah blah blah. And it's just at that point, I was like, yeah, okay. And with his recent joining of the Daily Wire of all places, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Really, it's
Oh,
amazing
yes.
how
Yeah,
quickly a
let's
man
see
can
who
fall.
cancels who.
But
You know?
and because he kind of larped. I'm not sure if he does it anymore, but he kind of used to larp as like this, like Christian. Like I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
I talk about the Christian message of Dostoevsky and blah blah.
Yeah. The
uh,
Christian method, yeah.
Yeah, and now he doesn't really talk about it, does he? I mean, I've seen like a recent video of him talking about
No.
the good
Yeah, the
parts of
message
Islam.
though. Yeah.
What should we learn from Islam? What the West
Yeah.
must learn from Islam? It's like, okay, right.
Yes.
Okay, I see
He's
your many
sold out, man.
colors. I see your many colors now. You
He's
fool.
Saruman, he sold out.
Oh god.
Right.
Seemingly wise, but leading astray.
Not true. He's completely he's off the res, man. Off the reservation, as they say. Terrible.
Yeah, so I mean, it seems like we're coming up to the end of our stream here. We're almost at three
Yeah.
hours.
I
So
know. I gotta prepare for my own.
excellent. Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I think we're gonna make this kind of a semi-regular stream. So kind of semi-regular
Yes.
show. Uh, Seems like people are enjoying it. I'm definitely enjoying it. You seem like you're enjoying it, MM. It's
I
kind of
am.
it's more of a chill stream. Talk about, we spoke off air about this, how politics especially can get tiring, can't it? And it's a lot of superficial things. It's politics. It can be and is often very surface. It happens at a surface level, whereas here, even though it's a work of fiction, so many truths, and especially truths that are dear to us as traditional Catholics, shine through. The Catholicism of the book is obvious, and we
Mhm.
especially if you want to hear more about that, you will want to listen to the first part, because I think we discussed Catholicism and how that shines through his work much more in the first part than we did mention it in today. But it's really nice, like a dive into what is valuable. What the moral structures, the what makes heroes, what makes villains, what makes good and evil. The basic questions that today we seem to, I mean, collectively, we seem to just not know the answer to anymore. Who the concept of good and evil doesn't even exist, really, does it? Uh,
No. No.
don't
Nope.
want don't want to end on a black pill. Don't want to end on a black pill,
It's a
but
real pill, okay?
it's a well, yeah.
We
So
stay, we stay, we stay, we stay optimistic through humor and our faith in God, but we should never try to cover up what reality is, you know?
well, thank you very much, guys, all of you, for joining, and thank you for those who will be listening to us on the replay, as many more will do, I'm sure, due to the timing of day when and the different time zones and things. Uh, I'll I'll be looking forward to reading through your comments. Actually, there's interesting couple of comments that I've seen a comment just before going live on our last part that maybe we kind of semi addressed it, maybe. Um, but it
Okay.
was about um, giving Peter Jackson too much credit. The films, the film, the film is better than most movie recreations of books, but they're still trash Hollywood. They pale in comparison to Tolkien's writings. Yeah, once again, we kind of went through that today, didn't we? We kind of
Yeah.
talked about the different media, and we talked about the shortcomings of the films. But I don't know, maybe it's just the veneer of nostalgia. I mean, I'm prepared to admit that nostalgia plays some part in my evaluation of the trilogy. I mean, I'm merely a human being, but I don't think I'm pulling it out of nowhere. I think there is genuine value to
Yeah.
the films.
It's not trash. Yeah, I'll take a stance. It's not trash. You know, if you're making an objective statement about The Hobbit, I would agree that there's Hollywood in that, a lot of Hollywood in that. But Lord of the Rings, nah, I think it's a touch of genius. They got some flaws. We critiqued upon it, but
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks everyone for joining once again, and thank you, Modern Monarchist, for joining as well. Do you want to, as per usual, where can we find you?
Yes, thank you for having me on, my friend. And you can find me on the Modern Monarchist on YouTube. I'll be the first bloke that pops up there. So you can find me. I do a daily show 5 days a week and mostly cover history. So if you love history, why don't you check it out?
Yeah, and I'll pin a link to your channel in the comments to this video so that people can find you conveniently and easily, and perhaps join you for the upcoming stream of yours. When is it you're going to do your stream today?
Oh, well, I still got to write my notes. So anywhere between an hour and an hour and a half, I'll be going live.
All right,
broadcast.
Excellent. Well, in that case, don't want to keep you for too long. So thank you very much for joining me, Modern Monarchist, and here's for many more episodes of this.
Indeed. God bless you.